Hello, beautiful people. I'm having a hell of a time this evening trying to wrangle my technology, which challenges me in every respect. So apologies for that. I also had a technical issue at the beginning, so apologies for that as well. But we are here, and I am very happy that it is so. I am joined by Matt, Kingpilled, host of The Lab, and very happy to so. It's been a while since we last talked. I have as everyone watching should know, there are two previous videos speaking to Matt about the tech bros, the counter elite, and what was coming. And his takes were, for the most part, prescient and accurate, starting way back. And he closely follows a number of things having to do with tech and I guess the overlap in the Venn diagram with the Trump administration and with tech bros, people like Musk, people like Thiel and others, as well as pretty closely following a number of things with monetary policy that I don't keep up with. And then that's not all. So very happy to have him here. Given my dissatisfaction with circumstances at present, it will be a good thing to talk to him because he generally takes a positive outlook, and I'd be happy to hear things from a positive outlook. Before we get started, and before I let Matt introduce himself, for those of you who don't already know of him, I reckon most of you do, let me say you can buy my books. Buy my books now. This is Vinculum. It's a dystopian sci-fi novel set in the year 2076 in Istanbul, where a book thief is after a particular esoteric text, and he's dealing with a corporate hitman and an esoteric sect of assassins pursuing him. You can get this on Amazon. There's a link in the description below. Also, my collected poems. You can pick up Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth. There's a link there below. And soon I will have a third book to add. I just have to finish the introduction. Everything else is done. Thanks to all of my patrons, all of the credit and none of the blame. A lot of you have fallen off of the map. I imagine these straitened financial circumstances affect everyone, but I thank you one and all, past and present. So yeah, and you can buy me a coffee these days now. Please do follow me on Twitter, on Telegram. Continue to follow me here on YouTube. I guess some of you are watching from Twitter as well. So yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Matt, thank you very much for being here. Maybe you could start out by just telling people, who you are and where they can follow your stuff.
One quick question. How did you settle on 2076? Is there anything meaningful about that, or did you just pick a date in the future?
I tried to pick something far enough out that I could play, some William Gibson style games, but that was close enough that I didn't have to go into some sort of, Asimov convulsions, creating something in the distant future, or like Arthur C. Clarke. But the book, I started writing it in 1997. And it took me, I didn't finish it until 2006 because it kept sitting there. And I'd do a little bit and sit there. So, it's a bit dated, even at this point, that strange thing where you read a sci-fi or anything set in the future and, you didn't anticipate the technology that actually did disappear. So your guesses about what it would be like are, off on a tangent. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Yeah, I was wondering if there was any particular meaning behind the year itself. Matt channels Kingpilled. And I've actually been I've started moving away from YouTube lately because I do a nearly daily show on during the week, the Astrolabe. Excuse me, the Astrolabe, which is essentially a variety show, inspired partly because I saw people saying, someone said something about how it'd be cool to see someone do a show where they just scroll through their Twitter timeline, and I couldn't bring myself to just straight up just do that because I couldn't guarantee exactly what would be there, what you would see. Sometimes the algorithm sucks or whatever, but I thought it would be interesting that there's obviously Twitter is like the town square of the world now, and increasingly so. All the narratives, it seems, if they don't start there, they proliferate there. So the people who spend a lot of time plugged into the circles on the internet that I'm in seem to be the ahead of the curve. And so the concept of the show is basically just taking all the interesting news and trending items and whatever catches my fancy on Twitter and turning that into a show. So that's the Astrolabe. I'm almost daily during the week. I also do a show called Network Armageddon Electric Boogaloo, which is with me and my my co-host Jason Miranchuk, good friend of mine, who also has his own channel, Miranchuk Now. And
yeah, and I've been on Jason's channel. Good guy. Shout out to him as well.
Absolutely, yeah. He so he and I have started migrating ourselves over to Kick as opposed to YouTube, because we do these long live streams, 3, 4, 5, sometimes more hours. And Kick seems to be a better platform, more catering to that, and it has a passive monetization thing based on viewership. So it kind of fits the lower tier streamers. And Asmongold is a very interesting guy who has been a very, very prominent streamer, came up as a video game guy, World of Warcraft, and has migrated into the political commentary sphere. And he's a pretty good representation of what you might call like the FanDuel Americans, the normie American who just wants to play video games and watch sports ball and just wants to grill, and doesn't necessarily have super enlightened political takes, but just kind of but has developed sort of a skepticism of the media and the narrative as it's presented. And he's prominent over there, big streamer. So we thought, hey, might be a better thing to get over there and kind of navigate away from the. I feel like YouTube is a if not a dying platform, it's going to move into a niche, and it's not really catered to the long form live streams, especially with demonetization and copyright infringement and all that sort of stuff. Which my streams have literally every single one is demonetized immediately off the top right away. Because I play something with a song in it or something from some TV show or something like that, and it just immediately gets censored. Half the videos get blocked immediately, and I have to go trim out the offending segment. And so we've been migrating our way over to Kick. So that's the show, the Astrolabe and Network Armageddon Electric Boogaloo, and then also I'm involved in a project called EWBSX. We have an app. It's on the Google and Apple app stores. EWBSX stands for Eternal White Boy Summer Radio, and it is a 24/7 curated audio experience inspired in large part by things like GTA Radio and what do you call it? What's the conspiracy late night conspiracy show?
Something about InfoWars runs 24 hours. So I mean,
well, it is InfoWars. It's from LA. It's InfoWars adjacent. Just completely escaped my mind.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
But someone will know it in the chat. My wife will know it. She knows it for sure. Yeah, so it's a combination of that. It's music, White Boy Summer bangers, and inspiring audio clips and stuff. Curated, runs 24/7. So it's kind of a callback to there's a lot of nostalgia, I think, right now for the 90s and the 2000s. That seems to be, there's a bunch of reasons for that I think we could get into and have a long conversation on. But nostalgia for that period seems to be really on its ascendancy right now. And a lot of people just kind of want to have the experience of those good times. And so we put together this project that it's free to access. You can just download the app and just listen to it. And I think it'll take you back. It's fun.
Hell yeah. Well, ladies and gents, if I'm not mistaken, you should be able to look in the description box below and see links at least for Kingpilled's X profile and for YouTube. So please do follow him. Give him a try if you don't know of him already. I think a lot of you have come over from a show of his that has just now ended. So I expect many of you are already familiar with him and should be from my channel in any case. So thank you, sir, again, for being here. And thanks to everyone who has joined us. So I'm interested, as you know, primarily in geopolitics, and that necessarily entails that I'm going to be looking at things like foreign policy quite a bit, that sort of thing. And, economics is outside of my bailiwick. So, beyond some vague understanding of the broad strokes. So there's a lot that I miss in terms of what's going on with Trump. and with the people who surround him in the administration, his relationships with others like Thiel and Musk that got mentioned earlier by me. Of course, he's had seemingly some sort of falling out with Musk. We'll see about how all that develops. As a consequence, for me, the events in Iran, the events related to Israel, also the events related to the ongoing war in Ukraine, China, other things like that, the Panama Canal, the Northwest Passage, Canada, these sorts of things, looking at the great game board, if you will, is what takes up most of my time. So as I said, a lot of that having to do with other things slips by me. And so I'd like to talk about the foreign policy aspects, but before we get into, the great clouds of ink that are billowing out of my mouth because of the black pill, maybe we can talk about what you're aware of that's been going on that we can see as wins or as likely wins that are in progress. What's been going on there, and also, whatever you want to cover in terms of, sort of the strict subject of what is now, with this coming to be 3 streams, the overlap with the tech bros, the counter elite in general. Sort of open the floor to you to cover what's been happening that, I'd be less likely to bitch about. It seems to me that the problems with foreign policy, as disgusting as I find them thus far, I think there's some wiggle room. I think he can pull a rabbit out of a hat. I'm absolutely not saying that I think it's all going to shit or that it's, some massive betrayal, but it could be. And we'll see in that respect. However, as I started to say, if this is the price, you've got to give the devil his due. In some respects, if this sort of failure, in my view, of foreign policy, if indeed it turns into that, if that's the price we have to pay for an improved domestic situation, it's still much, much, much better than the alternative. So let's see about that. So go ahead, tell us about what you've been tracking, what's been happening that we can perhaps feel good about.
So definitely the domestic situation, I think, is a cause for all sorts of optimism. On the show that I just finished doing, I went through a number of different things. First category was stuff related to deportations, the border, ICE, etc. And that is, I think we just had, what was the number? So in May of 2024, there were 62,000 plus, the fact that it's just a kind of a round number, 62,000 plus illegal aliens who were admitted into the country. And so 1 year ago, and last month, there were zero illegal aliens admitted to the country. There were yesterday, I think it was yesterday, the entire 24-hour period, there were 95 illegal alien encounters at the southern border. And obviously all 95 were summarily sent on their way. I know there's a lot of people who have passed around this talking point about how Trump is failing on the mass deportations because they look at the reported deportation numbers and they compare it to past years under past presidents and say, oh, well, he's, Obama deported more than he did. This is a very common CNN talking point that I've noticed a lot of ostensibly our guys have picked up. And there's some devil in the details there, because the numbers that were reported for Obama, there was a change that was made in the way that numbers were reported. And there's broadly 2 categories of what you might call deportations or something like that. There's the interior deportations, which is anywhere outside of 100 miles from the border. So this is going out into the community, encountering somebody well within the borders of the United States, arresting them, detaining them, removing them from the country. There's that deportation category. There's a new deportation category that Obama, in this record-keeping administrative change that was made, that categorized turnaways as deportations. So a turnaway would be, I think it's expanded to include anything within 100 miles of the border, but anybody who comes up to the border and is turned away from the border was considered a deportation under Obama. And so the numbers, I did a little back and forth with Grok on this, and then made sure to go through and check the sources on it to be clear that I'm not getting hallucinations from the robot. And the breakdown under Obama was something like 60% ish of the deportation numbers were turnaways. Under Trump, in his first term, it was something like 20 to 30% of his numbers were turnaways. So there was an increased focus on the interior numbers under Trump's first term. This term, it's massive, the interior numbers. So if you're comparing the directly reported numbers from Trump to Obama, you're seeing a really inflated number from Obama. That because I think when people are talking about deportations, they're not thinking of someone who's at or near the border and just being grabbed and put back across the border. At least when I think deportation, I think go find the illegal alien that's in the community, criminally, just by his mere presence, engaging in taking jobs or federal benefits or whatever, and removing them. That's what I call what I would call a deportation. The vast majority of Trump's deportations have been that category, not the turnaways, because he's also completely shut down the border, so people aren't coming across. But then beyond that, we got a report earlier this week that since Trump took office, so in about 6 months, there has been 1 million people removed from the foreign-born workforce. And a significant chunk of this is attributable to the administration encouraging self-deportation, which is ultimately where we're going to get the best bang for our buck. Because if you think about the amount of resources that are required to execute a mass deportation effort, you're talking about you have to pay salaries for people to go out and secure them. For each person who has to be deported, you're going to need a team of people. It can't just be one guy. You're going to need a handful of people to go secure each person. You're going to have the investigation time, the time to go try to find them, hunt them down, locate where they're at, go secure them, detain them, transport them, put them in a holding place, transport them elsewhere. All of that, and then you have all the support staff. You have all the administrative overhead. It's massively expensive. It's something like $20,000 per person to physically detain and deport them. Whereas it's free, effectively, or they're offering $1,000 stipend for people who use the CBP Home app, which is the formerly known. It was the I can't remember what they called it.
Whatever that app was that Biden had, the Biden administration put together to ease the process of their entry. Yeah,
right. It was like Uber.
Nice to see it turned around.
Yeah. It was like the Uber app for illegal immigrants. They turned it into a self-deportation app. And if somebody registers and says, "Hey, I'm here illegally, but I'm leaving," then they can secure a plane ticket and $1,000 stipends to leave the country.
And be put on some sort of list for reconsideration if they come in properly, right?
Yes, correct. And if they don't do that, if they don't sign up to self-deport, and they do get grabbed and deported, then I don't know the exact details of it, but I don't know if they're for life banned from applying for reentry to the country, or if there's a cooling down period of 10 years or something like that. But either way, there's a strong incentive to self-deport and strong disincentives to stay. And so they're offering $1,000 stipend. I'd offer them a $20,000 stipend if that's what it takes to get them out. If it costs $20,000 to go arrest them and detain them and deport them, then you could just pay them $20,000 and take that manpower and labor and everything and dedicate it elsewhere. So,
but of course, what I'd like to do is offer them like $5,000 or $10,000 and see if that's enough. Yeah, and
Yes.
and as I understand it, there's quite a bit that is basically waiting to drop, so to speak, with the possible passage of the big beautiful bill. Right, there's supposed to be quite a bit of funding for ICE to carry this into high gear. It's encouraging to watch the Giga Stephen Miller and his account, because at least he keeps hammering the right points. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, but maybe of course, finish whatever points you wanted to make. But I also wanted to ask you if you know about the latest situation in Los Angeles as well with the National Guard there, since that bears sort of on the picture we're creating the idea that if you, for every one person that you pick up and deport the hard way, there is a certain pressure and a general tendency that emerges for these people to deport themselves, particularly when you start looking at them having to consider the likelihood of, for example, no longer being able to have their meat packing or their hotel jobs. Trump signaled in one direction as regards that, and has now, I'm happy to say, turned around and announced, or at least some of his people have announced, that there's a turnabout with all that, and perhaps he's not going to be giving some special carve out to those industries.
Yes. So with California, with Los Angeles, there is the U.S. attorney down there. His name is Bill Asaley, and he from as far as I can tell, he is an American patriot. He's fully on board with removing as many illegals as possible, just absolutely maxing it out. And he when he was sent down there, appointed down there, and immediately put together a federal task force with, or actually a joint task force with CBP, DEA, ATF, and then the local police and sheriffs to facilitate the process to expedite the process of getting people out who need to be out. And he has been very outspoken against and actively working against condemning the sanctuary city policies down there as well. So we do have at least one guy in Southern California who's actively working on this process. He just announced today that they're going to be doing an investigation. I can't remember the exact details of it. I just saw it in passing. But they're doing investigating the funding of those riots. And I get the sense from the sort of rhetoric, it's starting to match some of the rhetoric that we're seeing from other agencies that are they're serious. They're not just doing this as just kind of like a token, like throw some red meat to the base and then drop it into some sort of an investigatory hole that just goes on forever and ever and ever and never turns anything up. Now I'm not saying it's not possible for that to still happen with it. The bureaucratic inertia is a monstrous beast to contend with. And as one guy who I like to follow and who I've learned a lot from, Tom Luongo, likes to say, we live in a quantum reality. Everyone kind of wants to treat a lot of these different issues as like it's like a deterministic thing that the future will be like the past. Everything that we've seen for how these certain things function and operate is exactly how it's going to be in the future. So the story's already been told and the case is settled and we know how everything is going to pan out. And that's not the case. We live in a quantum reality, and we play an active role. The observer plays an active role in and how events bear themselves out. So I think it's to add to that point. I guess I would say there's also I think it's very clear from a lot of different patterns that we are living in a liminal time, in a transitionary period between ages, between epochs. And I think this is the case on a kind of a smaller micro perspective, and it's also on a larger macro perspective. Whatever you may think of things like the fourth turning, or there's like century sort of cycles that people talk about.
The age of Pisces becoming the age of Aquarius.
Exactly.
I was there, man.
Yep.
I was there for it, baby.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of these different cycles. Even the Mayan calendar cycle there's all these different cycles that are thousands of year cycles. There's the 12,000 year disaster cycle, which has some correspondence kind of the Mayan calendar. All these different cycles, they all point to this age. So you may kind of object to an individual one or say, oh, I think that has this problem or that problem. But I think it's hard to ignore the fact that throughout history, and so presently and in the past, people have studied these sort of historical patterns and cycles, and they've developed various different methodologies that are sometimes convergent, sometimes divergent, that all point to this broader period of time being the transition point, the time where one world ends and another one begins. So and I think that what we're seeing happen is we're getting evidence of this every day. We're getting pattern breaks in a lot of these things every single day. Just the mere fact that there's mass deportations happening and that the American people are enthusiastic about it and that they're proceeding, and every one of these psyops that gets ginned up, they have the crying abuelita, or whatever thing they try to. You got Democratic senators who are getting themselves arrested and flailing around and stuff, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. They're like, whatever, do your performative thing, but get them out. That itself is a pattern breaker. So there's
Yeah,
you can just go
definitely
through
a
a whole
shift
list
in
of
the
these.
yeah, definitely a shift in the zeitgeist. The only issue is we do have one big cycle, and that's the Kali Yuga, and I think it's something like somewhere north of 400,000 years, and we're only about 5,000 years into it. So
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to do the black pill thing in the background, but yeah, they're joking aside, there absolutely is a shift, and it's not just something pushed on social media. This last Trump election, I had a couple of friends who, one of whom called himself a libertarian, and the other one was just sort of vaguely political, his wife, depending on the election and the personalities involved. And I was surprised to discover both of them, and they had been very, very skeptical of Trump previously, had voted for him this time. So it's there's evidence of it out there. I mean, anecdotal, whatever, but I've seen such things in my life. I certainly hope that they continue to that the attitude, the collective, unconscious and conscious as regards all of this, continues to shift. Yeah. So in California, do you know whether or not we are still seeing the presence of the National Guard and any attempts to riot? It seems like that has been eclipsed by more recent news. I was just wondering if you had caught whether any of that is really still going on. Their attempts to push the another summer of love, with the No Kings protest and the rest.
Regarding Southern California, I don't know for sure. I don't know if it's still going on. I think I don't think it is. I think it was kind of short lived. Which itself is, there's been a number of these things that, I see a headline and I'm like, okay, here it is. Here's the one. Here's the thing that kicks it all off. And I'll be honest, I thought that No Kings thing this weekend, I thought the having it happen at the same time as the big military parade and having that be Flag Day, 250th anniversary of the Army and Trump's birthday, and then having this big protest and the buildup of it being everything going on in California, my spidey senses were going off big time, and I thought like this, there might be something here, and it was just a gigantic flop, just a bunch of, it looked like they emptied the retirement homes, and it was a bunch of like goofy boomers just out waving really goofy signs, and nobody, it hardly made headlines. It kind of was there fleetingly and then disappeared again. And I
it's
think
like people in it's like people in Washington and Oregon, a handful of Antifa there, and then in the rest of the cities, in addition to the boomers, you had a small selection of opportunistic looters,
right,
as usual.
Right. Yeah. But it didn't. And I think that one of the first things the administration did was the big campaign against USAID, which I'll kind of try to tie a few different threads here together into one. So USAID was, I think there was a sequencing here that I think was done intentionally. So you had Doge, the establishment of Doge, the big buildup around it and everything. And then it was Doge that was at least the narrative pretext for all of the information coming out about USAID, which is what facilitated the big blitz on the NGOs, and then the consolidation, the stripping down of USAID and its consolidation into the Department of State directly under the direct acting leadership of Marco Rubio, who himself has been kind of a revelation. And then that, I think the swiftness and comprehensiveness of that, at least narrative assault, is what set the stage for a lot of what has followed. I think it was really necessary for them to get out in front of that. And for this reason, I'll say that even if Doge never results in the actual literal cutting of spending, which they already have, but even if they were to never actually turn into anything, if we never heard about Doge again and it was some just sort of whatever agency that continued on in the federal government and produced quarterly reports and none of it ever went anywhere, I would say that it was a massive win just for that narrative pretext that it established at the beginning. which unveiled all of this USAID stuff, which following on from that then is all of the revelations about regime change, how much of the whole woke thing was totally astroturfed, how many different celebrities have been on the take, all of the big slush funds, like what was the one with Stacey Abrams? She had an NGO that she created, and it existed for like 3 or 4 months, brought in $60 worth of donations, and then got $20 billion in grants or something absurd like that. Some billions of dollars. Just plain obvious fraud. And we got just weeks of just an absolute barrage of those types of stories. And the libs have done their whole getting temporary restraining orders and injunctions and stuff through the courts, and there's all these traitorous judges. But that massive barrage is what forced all of those judges to come out and start ruling, issuing all these absurd injunctions. And then you could see from the response of the administration that they knew that this was coming. They were trying to provoke this, and they had all of the legal arguments ready made. And I know a lot of people are very impatient, and they will just tell the courts to go fuck themselves and ignore them, ignore everything. But if you want these sorts of changes to stick, they have to have they have to appear legitimate. You have to do the hard work of going through all of these processes. Otherwise you're going to get an administration that's so drowned in scandal that people just start distancing themselves from it. The broader population, the public sentiment wants to distance themselves from it just because it seems like it just seems illegitimate. But if you actually go through the process of chasing down every single one of these, establishing the legal precedents, and reserve the nuclear option for, it would just be such a waste to have the president use the nuclear option on
before anyone has ever ruled on it. Yeah, but you don't use the nuclear option on a first tier appellate court at the state level.
Yes,
but wait until you see how the Supreme Court's going to rule on it. And as of course, as you're intimating here, it's without any of it being fixed or resolved in some sense. And we've had a few wins in that respect. Though I haven't followed all of them closely. I've seen them come across the radar. They're not absolutely conclusive or anything, but they're not entirely disheartening either. If you don't take care of this, then you're just going to have someone else come in with a new set of executive orders. Do we know what's going on in terms of any of these legal cases? The law's delay, as Shakespeare put it, of course, signals that it's going to be a while. That's just how this shit works. But is there anything to report on that front?
I spent a little while following each one as they dropped until so many of them started building up that it was just impossible to try to keep track of everything that's happening. Because at this point, there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of them. I even saw one today. There's some court that has just I don't know the exact legal explanation, but basically they said that they ordered the State Department to that they cannot restrict passport gender to just male female, and it was actually one of the so-called PayPal mafia guys is the one that interacted with it on Twitter and brought it to my attention while I was smoking just before I came up here, and he said, okay, this is one that should just be ignored. This is one of the ones that you just straight up ignore. Like what you're saying, the Department of State can't decide what's going to be on the passports, like what biological information you need to include on the passport. This is going to be determined by some judge somewhere. Completely absurd. So I don't know like where all of the cases are going, but I do know that or what their current status is. But I do know that there's been 2 interesting reports. One of them I just read on my show and did just before this, and one I read a couple weeks ago, that in the case of both the DOJ and DHS, Stephen Miller is the Giga J, as you mentioned. He has effective operational control over both agencies, and Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem are basically the PR faces for the agencies. Miller is the one who's running the show in both cases. He's probably I'd say outside of Trump and maybe JD, but even then, Miller is probably the most powerful person in the administration. It would be like Miller, probably Rubio, Vance, and Trump himself. But Miller is essentially has complete operational control over the entire immigration and the legal approach for the administration. And obviously, generally speaking, someone of his particular persuasion isn't someone I would trust at all. But I think at this point, he has pretty well demonstrated that I've never seen someone that is so wholeheartedly focused on a single issue. He has not tweeted a single time about Israel and Iran. Not one single
Yeah,
tweet.
well, I've noticed that. I was going to bring that up also. He's staying sharply focused on his remit, on his mandate. And that's good. I also think it's wise on his part to just stay the hell out of it, because he knows what portion of Trump's base is most interested in what he's doing, and it's likely to hurt his brand, so to speak, to come in on that. So it shows that he's I think he's more dialed in to the dissident right, just fed up and sick of it side of Trump's base than the rest of Trump's cabinet combined. I mean, certainly he shows more of an eye for it than Vance does. Now, of course, Vance has to play a very different role. He's got to be the above it all measured, statesman to some extent, whereas Miller can just come in and be like, call a spade a spade.
Miller's just there to shatter kneecaps.
Yeah, well, and just a word to the YouTube algorithms. When I say call a spade, I'm referring to the playing card, But yeah, and what I also wanted to ask you about the so we have some wins there. Well, I was going to ask about the tech bros, but I should point out that it is my understanding that U.S. aid has not been entirely disappeared. I think it is there by an act of Congress. Trump was forced to let go of his hold on the funding. It is not clear to me at this point what it is now. I cannot help but imagine it's going to continue to perform the foreign policy functions of destabilization of, regimes around the world that we want to see changed. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's going to go away. It's one of the tools of statecraft, however objectionable it is. But as you said, a lot of the dirty laundry was aired. The bottom line is Trump could not withhold the money on it forever. And I think that there was certainly a period where they took a very strong hit, and a lot of their aspects of their operations fell apart for lack of funding just for that period, or due to exposure of what was actually happening there, creating more pressure on them domestically within the various countries that they were operating in. We'll see. But yeah, I wanted to jump over to the tech bros stuff
real quick before you get to that. One other thing I should put in the category of wins. At the State Department, we've now seen there's a third person. I can't think of who it is now, but Michael Anton has I don't remember the name of his position. It's it's like 10 characters, 10 words long, but has an important policy position at the administration. Oh, the second person was Darren Beattie, is also now part of the State Department and has been, he's doing his best impression of Joseph McCarthy. Let's say that at the State Department, looking for people who have been trying to get lists of names of people who have been involved in censorship activities and various other sorts of malfeasance. And he's got everyone in a tizzy over there because he's sending them very sternly worded messages demanding this information be brought to him. And then a third one who was just announced earlier this week, I think, NS Lyons, an NRX substacker, very prolific and very insightful guy. He is now working at the State Department as well. So we have the posters in control meme is gradually becoming real life more and more. And there's a story. This is kind of I don't know, maybe Jason Miranchuk calls them bitter white pills. But there was a colonel who was the head of he reported directly to the Joint Chiefs. He was the head of the Israel and Egypt region, under the Joint Chiefs, reporting to them. He just got outed. He was pretty sloppy in the OPSEC, so I think he probably could have done a lot better than that. But he was outed, as he's been posting on social media about how Israel is our worst ally. They have this policy of just indiscriminately targeting Palestinians. It's completely barbaric and inhumane. We are being perverted by these Judeo-supremacist values, and he was pretty. I can't believe that a colonel was posting online effectively under his own name, talking about all these sorts of things.
Yeah, that's a career killer.
Yes. So the story was broken today, and then a couple hours after it was broken, the guy who broke it said that he's been removed from his position and returned to service. Now, I thought it was interesting that he's just being returned to service. He's not being, like strung up out in public.
Frog marched out.
Yep. Yeah. But so there's. I've heard tell for a while and seen little whispers here and there that there is a significant presence within the Pentagon that is wholly at odds with the last few decades of U.S. foreign policy. You might call them, sovereigntists. Maybe American sovereigntist might be the best way. You could call them patriots. They're guys who are not in favor of the way that foreign policy has been conducted, and believe that it is threatening the that America's greatest national security threat is its own foreign policy. And you could, even if you didn't have direct reports or faces that you could put names or faces you could put to these people, you can kind of see their sort of like a black hole, that you identify the black hole by the activity of stuff around it, or maybe the absence of certain things. You can identify that there are rebellious elements within the Pentagon who have been engaged in very careful neutering of various foreign policy initiatives, trying to prevent them from breaking out completely. There's been reports of how, I don't know if this is recent, I think this is in the last couple of years, but there was some of the commanders of the armed forces for the U.S. were regularly meeting with their counterparts in Russia to coordinate actions in the Middle East and ensure that they're not stepping on each other's toes accidentally. And there's one interesting story that you can look up, which is I think it's like CIA rebels. They get into a firefight. CIA-backed rebels get into a firefight with Pentagon-backed rebels. There was an operation the CIA was engaging in, and the Pentagon armed their own faction of rebels, and they went in and wiped out the CIA-backed rebels. So there's been little hints of this along the way, that the Pentagon is not a monolithic entity, and there are a lot of people within it who are very unhappy with how things are going. Many of them were purged by Obama. But this is a point that Stormy Waters has made a lot, that what happened is all of those generals and colonels who were purged by Obama from the official armed forces wound up starting defense contracting firms, bringing over all of their, like, when they're the guys who served under them, when they leave the military, they get hired on by these companies. So there's an entire network of defense contractors, private defense contractors, whose funding is completely private. These aren't public companies; they're private companies whose funding is it's kind of a mystery who's actually funding them. But they're all the guys they're run and operated by all the guys who Obama forced out. And each of those generals or colonels has a band of loyal men who will fight and die for them at the drop of a hat. Some of them we've gotten to know them more, like Douglas McGregor, but there are also people within the intelligence community like Larry Johnson who've gone through a similar thing, who've come out and they've revealed to us a lot of the behind the scenes operations, which is how we've known about all the corruption and malfeasance within the Pentagon. But I would say that there's probably a pretty good chance that there is more American military firepower outside the formal armed forces than within it.
You mean
You're
when
muted.
you say firepower, just can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Oh, people in the chat,
But you're not
if you could
muted
let
on
me
the
know.
screen.
Yeah, I'm not. In the chat, let me know if you guys can hear me. Check, check, check. Testing, testing, testing. Okay, yeah, they say they can.
Hear you. They can hear you.
Headphones.
I don't know why I suddenly cannot hear you.
Stand by, ladies and gentlemen. Matt will
Let me see if
attempt
my
to deal
output
with
settings
the.
got changed.
And let me check my settings over here.
Okay, say something now.
Check, check, check. Testing.
Okay, they did get changed.
Testing.
And I just changed them
Testing.
back.
Testing, testing.
Hold on.
Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Let's see. Edit mic settings. I'll check yours. Yep.
Okay.
Everything's good on my end.
I can't hear you at all.
We could just both sort of talk whenever we want to. Do you want to? Well, I guess I can't. Yeah. I guess he's going to go out and come back in. Yeah. As I was starting to say before we had our boomer audio moment, I'm assuming that what Matt's talking about there when he says that there's more firepower outside of it, he's speaking metaphorically in terms of people able to bring, pressure to bear on the administration in terms of their favored stance. So, yeah, let's see how that goes with Matt coming back in. Yes. What else as regards? Yeah, the Pentagon stuff I don't know as much about. Here it is. Let's see if this helps.
Okay.
Hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. No idea what the settings all changed on my screen.
Well, as they said, don't talk about the kernels too much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know if the black helicopters are flying over us or whatever, but we're good to go now. Yeah, I was just going to tell people that when you said that there's more firepower outside of the Pentagon, of course, it seems you're speaking metaphorically about people able to bring pressure to bear on the administration and shift its policies with lobbying and money and back channel organization. So
there's also there was another policy of Obama's that I don't remember the specific details of it, but there was a policy of Obama's that leaned much more heavily on contractors. A lot of the operational
the Eric Prince
expertise
stuff and
yeah.
Okay, you could still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you make of just really quickly before we get to the tech bros? I know we keep saying we're going to do that, but what do you make? I heard something came across the radar when I was foaming at the mouth yesterday about, Trump doing things like unconditional surrender on Truth Social. But it was about how Tulsi Gabbard apparently wasn't present at some meeting where you would expect her to have been present. And then I saw something else about how there may be a new ODNI coming in, but I have not seen anything further about that. I want to caution everybody. This is just what do they like to call it in the Bush days? Chatter. This is just chatter coming across the social media worlds of bullshit and manipulation. Everybody remember, as I've said many times, social media is the weapon. We are inside the weapon. We are both the thing that the weapon is pointed at, as well as the mechanism of its action. So, exercise the greatest caution and skepticism when dealing with all things associated with social media. Of course, everybody fucking knows this. Sorry. So have you heard anything about this? What's going on with Tulsi Gabbard?
The report that I saw, and it's I haven't really looked at this to verify all of the authenticity and everything, but the report that I saw was that she had guard duty that she was on guard duty instead of being there, which I didn't know that that would be a thing for her, someone in her position.
Yeah, maybe yeah, that's convenient,
Yeah.
But maybe you do have to do your National Guard duty when you're serving in public office. I don't know.
But she also
I've got
released a statement
too long a
saying,
hair to be a veteran.
yeah, right. Yeah, same here. She also released a statement saying that she and Trump were in full alignment on the subject of uranium enrichment in Iran. So whether that's a coerced statement or an authentic statement, not the foggiest idea.
Yeah, I don't think you have to coerce. I don't think you have to coerce Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I know she's the darling, or has been until recently, of the Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, Judge Napolitano kind of crew, which is an interesting phenomenon in its own right. How they're all constantly going back and forth to Russia and having Russian American guests on, and I think in that respect, I think that we're looking at a joint Russian and American intelligence operation. I don't think anybody ever retires from any of those organizations. But that's just me speculating. Okay, so we don't need to get to the foreign policy stuff just yet. What's going on with Thiel? I've seen the usual howling about Palantir and Foundry and databases coming together. People basically freaking out about Palantir. It's been my take that we've been living in that world forever. This is not a phone. This is a surveillance device that comes complete with microphones and multiple cameras and granular assessment of all your interactions that are text-based, your geolocation, your relationships that can be networked, your financial transactions, all this shit. I'm becoming redundant. But the point is that we've been in a world with next to no privacy at all for quite some time. Back in the 2000s, right after the 9/11 stuff, I remember all these companies began to appear. One of them was ChoicePoint, that was run out of Atlanta, where I lived and was working in the tech sector at the time. And I just watched whole swaths of tech sector development just disappear. And in came all this security stuff. And ChoicePoint was, it's naive. In retrospect, I can see how naive I was, because I thought it was a big deal. Many people did. That ChoicePoint was basically buying old DMV photographs from different states' Department of Motor Vehicles in order to put them into a major private sector database that could be used to vet people prior to employment. So this whole thing of the third party private sector security apparatus is old, and I'm sure it's far older than ChoicePoint. As long as the CIA has been able to raise its own money and make its own money that never appears on the books, this shit has been around. So, I'm not into the idea of ever more granular and ever more powerful surveillance of me and everything that I do. But it's a fact; it's not going to go away, and it's one of these situations where the AI has to be fed. And this is a national security concern at this point, because how you teach it, that affects its ability to predict the emergence of issues before they happen. It comes down to whether or not drones can autonomously spot something and react to it. And all of that kind of technology is under development by countries like China. And a totalitarian state like China certainly is going to open all of its available data sources to the AI so it can train themselves on it, or that, the various types of AI can train themselves, if you'll allow the expression, on the available data. If we don't do it, it is an arms race fundamentally. So that part, I'm not so much worried about, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. So the Palantir stuff that I've seen in the news, and as you've pointed out, and I agree with you, those tools can be used for good things, as well as things that I'd be less sanguine about. So Thiel, I haven't seen really raising his head. Maybe you have. Perhaps you can tell us what you know about him. If nothing, then we can jump over to the subject of Musk and his apparent falling out with Trump. I know you had some takes on that that seemed solid to me. The only one that I would add to it was this idea, and it seems it occurred to you as well, that Elon Musk has an obligation to shareholders, and it's a fiduciary duty, and he could put himself in a very bad situation if and open himself to legitimate legal issues that are real and could be effective against him if he is in a situation where he is not meeting that fiduciary duty to shareholders. So if he skates and the Doge stuff is over, and suddenly he has a falling out with Trump, then he's in a much better position in terms of that role running these companies, some of which, at least, perhaps all of them, are publicly traded. I'm not sure. Now, also talking about that, I just realized there was one thing I wanted to add with Doge and Musk that relates to what I was just saying about needing to feed the AI. One of my beliefs, well, let's say a hypothesis of mine is that the Doge project is sort of what the tech bros were owed, and the security services, which, you know, the tech apparatus and these people are closely intertwined with. You know, I think a number of people from some of these tech companies just got honorary ranks of lieutenant colonel and have been brought in to help with military development of technical things, doubtless related to AI and drones and other things, surveillance and you know, predictive shit. I think what's happened, or part of the, how do I say this? I think that part of what the tech bros wanted in exchange for their support was access to just these expanded sets of government data. If you think about the United States government being the single largest organization in the world, and you think about how far ahead we've been for quite some time in terms of record keeping, you know, whatever Doge can say about the different tools that we have and how they're in silos and they don't communicate well and all these other things, compare that to any other country on earth.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of data that came in and the depth of that data in time and its breadth in terms of covering things, whatever its flaws are, it has to, what the information that is in the federal government's hands has to constitute a much broader and deeper data set for AI to train itself on than any other country has. And so Doge, to me, it seems like on the surface, a lot of what it was doing was to come in and say, oh, we saved this, you know, these billions here and these billions there. But I think really, and we saw headlines about it, you know, the resistance of different silos within the federal government to cracking open their data sources. A lot of the bitching about Palantir, predictably, is like, oh, they bring all these things together, the medical information, the criminal background, the financial stuff, and what kind of picture can they paint of you? Well, people who pay attention to tech have known about what's called a digital twin for quite some time. I think, you know, my hypothesis is that Doge was partially, you know, how do I put this? A friend of mine was at a flea market, and he was buying jars of buttons for his wife because, you know, women love to take buttons out and arrange them and think about how they could use them and look at the antique buttons. So there were like 3 jars of buttons, and this guy was like, you know, the guy who was selling it, he's like, yeah, man, I'll sell you these jars of buttons. How much you want to give me for them? And he's like, I'll give you $10 for each one. And, you know, my friend bought the jars, and the guy was kind of laughing to himself, thinking those old buttons aren't worth $10 each. And as my friend and I walked off, he's like, each one of these mason jars is worth $20. You know, so the idea is that the thing that you're seemingly after isn't what you're after at all. And I think that that's going on with Doge. A lot of that was just to crack those sources of information open and get them flowing into those databases. But coming back to Musk, one of the things that might be going on is that he just wanted to create some distance from Trump. But you had more thoughts on that. And I think, as usual, you paid more attention to it, looked at it more closely. What's your take on that?
Okay, so just make sure I get all these points here. I got Musk, Doge, Palantir, and Thiel. I guess I do have a little something about Thiel. So I'll go in order: Thiel, Palantir, Musk, and Doge. So Thiel hasn't been very prominent recently, though he has, depending on what you qualify as recently, within the last 6 months or so, since Trump was president, He had an interview series that he's done. They did 2 parts. I don't know if they're going to continue doing it with the something institute. I just forgot the name of it. You'll find it if you look up Thiel and Apocalypse. You'll find it. And in that interview, he talks pretty extensively. He also went on trigonometry and had a similar conversation with those insufferable bleep the slurs. And in both those conversations, interestingly, he talked about how his worst fear is essentially the totalitarian technocratic one world state, which is kind of funny that he is very
Machine Intelligence Research Institute.
No, it's like a philosophical institute. It's right there.
Somebody can tell us in the chat, and I can stop interrupting you. Sorry, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. So he talked about how he said there's this phenomenon that repeats itself throughout history where people say, oh, here's the big bad thing that's coming. And in the name of stopping the big bad thing, we need to embrace the Antichrist. That was and he used the term Antichrist. He spoke specifically of that. He says people talk about the apocalypse and they say that here's this incoming apocalypse. And to avoid that apocalypse, we need to embrace the Antichrist. And which is very, very interesting comment for a gay South African tech overlord. Those are very interesting comments. And I think it doesn't correspond to the meme of Thiel that is proliferated on the internet. I think Thiel is probably one of the most misunderstood of the maybe public figure in general. He's much more he's much less of a burgeoning supervillain than I think a lot of people want to think of him. He's particularly from talking to people who have been close to him, who've spent time around him. He is, in spite of his lifestyle, he's a very sober, devout Christian and is extremely right-wing. If you note that his mentors were his 2 mentors, he's had 2 primary mentors in his life. One of them was Rene Girard, a Catholic philosopher, theologian, and the other one was Antonin Scalia. And he was very, very close personally with Antonin Scalia. Was absolutely devastated when Scalia was murdered, because he was murdered. And if you view Thiel, I think if you can suspend disbelief and you can view him as a just say, okay, this is a devout, extremely right-wing Christian who is fearful of a one world technocratic state, which he equates with the Antichrist. And his mentors were the progenitor of mimetic theory and a devout Roman Catholic jurist who was unceremoniously murdered because of particular dark associations. That I think you could start to put together a different picture of him, I believe. Now, I think he's kind of a complicated character. Like I don't think that it's impossible that, again, living in a quantum reality, I don't think it's impossible that he couldn't be actually emerge as a supervillain. I wouldn't say that thing is that possibility is completely off the table. As it is, I think that's the case with all of us. I think the worst sinner and the greatest saint are often the same person in the same lifetime. So it kind of depends on what the order is there. But anyways, I say in the chat, is he not Jewish? No, I don't think he's Jewish. Not to my understanding.
No,
he's German
I just
and
double
South
checked.
African.
Yeah, and he's the LLM creature is asserting that he's a practicing Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So then some comments regarding Palantir. Fully wholeheartely agree with your entire assessment on it. And particularly, I'm glad you emphasized you pointed out that. Well, I'll say this: Palantir has been their first investor was In-Q-Tel. the CIA's VC fund. So it's kind of curious. One might question why it is that this news was leaked about Palantir in such a way to kind of get everybody whipped up into a froth, given that Palantir has effectively been a government operation since its inception, and has been. It was, I don't know, a month ago, 2 months ago, it was announced that they just secured a major contract with ICE to facilitate the deportation process, the consolidation and filtering of information to expedite the deportation process.
Real-time tracking of immigrant movements. Yeah.
Yes. And see, here's, as you say, it's kind of the Faustian bargain. If you want 50 million people who don't belong here to be expeditiously removed from the country, and we live in a high-tech age with these sorts of tools at our disposal, and as you point out, if we could choose not to use them, but that doesn't mean that other competitor nations are going to make the same decision, then it seems to me to be silly to demand this massive lift, which is, we talked about how much it costs and all the steps and stuff that go into a deportation effort. If you're talking about removing 50 million people from the country, even if it's 10 million or 20 million people, this is a military operation. This is a substantial military operation to spread out throughout the country and track down every last one of these people and remove them from the country. And you could say, I when I posted about this, I had some people who were like, "Oh, we didn't need that sort of technology when we were deporting people in the 90s." And I'm like, we don't live in the 90s. If this technology was available then they would have used it then. And progenitors or precursors of this technology that were available then were used then. And I'd also make the observation that Palantir is very clearly, it's military technology from its inception. And it's had commercial usage, which is kind of how this stuff gets popularized or gets put out to the masses. It's released commercially. Well, yes, well stated. But all this stuff begins as military technology, whether it's the military actively or military-like organizations actively producing it themselves or capitalizing on it, assuming somebody else produces it, and either whacking them or just hiring them. This is what the internet was. The internet was a communications protocol for doomsday scenarios to ensure that nuclear launches, there could be communication to facilitate a nuclear doomsday sort of scenario. That's where the internet came from. And I think if you had, before the internet emerged, if you had described to someone the darkest predictions of what the internet was going to bring, then every single person you talk to, if you talk to them about like the capacity for massive psyops and the deracination effect of it, and the mental illness that it sparks and cultivates, what it does to the human psychology, the effects of looking at screens on your eyes and your brain and affecting your sleep cycles and your health and your weight, and it goes on and on and on. The negative effects of the internet are multitudinous. And yet every single person who is extremely disturbed at this notion of Palantir, now 20 plus years after its creation, they talk about, we're going to use it for consolidating data between agencies, this siloed data, ensure that it can be accessed and analyzed in a streamlined way. They're announcing this, and everyone, Palantir is this thing's been around for 20 years, and now it's supposed to be a big story we get all freaked out about. Every single one of those people who's upset about that is posting about it on the internet. They're using the internet.
Yeah, and they probably have fucking Alexa in their kitchen or their bedroom.
Yeah, right. Right.
So, whatever.
And they're
I'm not saying I like it, but the train has fucking left the station a long time ago.
Exactly. And this I think is I think there's a valuable observation or lesson to be had in there about the character of technology in general. This is kind of a recurring cycle, I think, compounding recurring cycle with humanity is the development of technology, which facilitates. Technology is ultimately like leverage off of the individual. It allows the individual to do more than an individual would normally be capable of on their own. And I think a proper definition of technology would even include something like language. I think language is maybe even the most fundamental technology. It's the ability to, it's what allows us to organize as a larger entity or a larger unit, which is a form of leverage. Now, it comes at a cost. The same with all technology. It all has a cost. So you get the benefits, you also get the cost. But if you over-index on the costs, then you miss out on the benefits. And also, these sorts of cycles are, you're not going to stop the human cycle of the evolution of technology. The only way that you would be able to stop it is through the implementation of technology. So it's self-defeating. So I think that within, you might think of it this way, because this I would say applies to the notion of like a digital ID, a federal digital ID, which is absolutely 100% coming. Every single person is going to be required to have a federal digital ID, and this is how they're going to secure elections.
And yeah, it's like Zappa was saying earlier, and Academic Agent has pointed it out, in Britain, that Blair is hammering on it. And indeed, Blair is hammering from behind the scenes on the whole idea that, it'll be a great thing. Welcome the federal, digital ID. For a long time, that was a huge back and forth, with the sort of libertarians, was the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and people back in the day, like the guy who was in charge of Sun Microsystems, that was taking it to the man in the form of Bill Gates, who was trying to control everything. And that was around the time that Apple got bought by Gates, or a large portion of it was, and you had a much stronger sort of online libertarian push for internet freedoms back in those days. And they I forgot my damn thought. Good God.
You're talking about digital ID?
Yes, the digital. Thank you, sir. Good Lord, it's hell to get old. We've had digital ID for, not digital ID, but the big thing was about a federal ID. And they're like, no, it should be kept in the hands of the states because we don't want the federal government having that power. But everybody can take a look at their damn driver's license now. It's got a star on it. And all they did is they just backdoored the federal ID through your own existing state IDs. And everyone's like, oh, I'm just still getting my normal driver's license. Well, it's got that star on it now, which means it's now federal identification. Sorry, just want to, and thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. That's the driver's license thing was exactly what I was going to bring up. If imagine if we didn't have driver's licenses right now, and someone was introducing the idea, hey, you're going to have to go get this ID, get this document that you have to carry with yourself everywhere. That you have to carry with yourself everywhere. You're not going to be allowed to operate a motor vehicle. You're going to be required to present it for various methods of payment, or to access federal buildings, or to fly, or to whatever else. You're going to be required to carry this with you everywhere, and you can't operate a motor vehicle without it. If that didn't exist right now and somebody was to suggest it, there would be a massive outcry. You might get an epic chimping out over something like that. But to us, I have never met a single person who objects to having a driver's license. Some people might not like having it or whatever, but there's like, whatever. You just go get your.
No, I just want to take it away from other people, like Indian truckers who don't know how to drive.
Yeah, and Asian women. I would say women, but my wife is probably watching.
Yeah.
So
right. I was about to say careful.
So I think, our children, maybe, and definitely our grandchildren are going to live in a world where it's like, what? It's crazy. There used to be no federal digital ID. It's crazy that we live so long without it. It's going to be completely mundane, I think. Which isn't to say that the downsides people predict with it are not there. It's that those downsides are inevitable. They're going to happen, and you should just prepare yourself now to live with those downsides, as you currently live with the downsides of driver's licenses or
the use of social media, or any of the other things that you talked about, text neck, text thumb, and these are medical conditions now that are recognized. So that's that's part of that's part of the Thiel picture, I guess. If there isn't anything further you wanted to cover on Thiel, can we jump to Musk?
One other thing about Palantir that because there's a lot of people who have been very concerned about its connections, its obvious connections to Israel, and its current the head of the company currently being a self-described devout Zionist and a literal student of the Frankfurt School. Alex Karp was not he was a Habermas. He was Habermas was his mentor. As a direct student of him, and so he's a philosopher. Like, his background was in philosophy. He and Thiel met at Stanford, and they became fast friends. Even though, as Karp describes it, they have the exact opposite position on almost everything. And they argued relentlessly and developed a friendship out of that, and ultimately founded Palantir together. This is at least the lore. This is the lore officially. Who knows what's actually true, but I think Karp is a very, very interesting character. He's much more, if I was doing the ascendant supervillain analysis on him and Thiel individually, I would put him much closer to the ascendant supervillain status than Thiel. But he's also, a lot of these guys, to kind of segue into the tech bro thing, a lot of these guys, as I began studying them, I realized that they're not so easy. They're not so easily categorized with some of these labels, like Zionist. Zionist can kind of mean a lot of things. It means different things to different people. But there's this. The best way I've come up with to describe this is that there's an emergent segment of. It's very represented among the tech right, but it's also for the so-called tech right. It's also, I would say, probably the default position among the FanDuel Americans, the average normie, which is that it is pro-Israel, but it's also pro-America. And I would put this as distinct from the neocons or the Zionists, whose position is that America exists for the sake of Israel. It was even what's his name? One of the sort of disgraced former media guys, Bill Mitchell, just said something. He tweeted something yesterday or today about how
the reason that America exists today is because God helped it, because God knew that America was going to help Israel, and if we stop helping Israel, maybe God will, revoke his support for the United States. I was like, oh my fucking God.
I fully endorse sending B2s over Iran to drop Bill Mitchell and Randy Fine on it.
God,
send like Eric Erickson and send the rest of those guys all with them. But what was I saying? Pro-Israel. So there's this other category of people who they're very pro-Israel, but they also are they don't adopt this position that America exists for the sake of Israel. They say America and Israel are allies, and Israel should exist, and I love Israel, and I want Israel, and I want America to help and support Israel, but I also want America to maintain its own sovereignty. And I think for a lot of the people who run in our general circles, that's kind of a difficult circle to square. But it's this is how these people think and believe. So I've been trying to kind of work out how to relate and engage with them, because they tend to be very they're very disturbed by anti-Semitism, and they in many cases are supportive of legislative initiatives to ban it or that sort of thing, which I think I'm probably 50-50 on whether we're going to get a real big push on that front. I think there's the possibility, but there's also a significant contingent among the so-called tech right who would absolutely not be supportive of something like that. I see some like someone like Chamath Palihapitiya or David Sachs at the All In podcast. There's a number of these guys who are part of this sort of Silicon Valley MAGA contingent that I looked at, who they're pro-Israel, they're very pro-Israel, but they're also extremely anti-neocon. They have deep contempt for the neocons and for the nation building, regime change sort of thing. David Sachs is probably the foremost representative of that position. He's been extremely critical of the U.S.'s prosecution of the Ukraine war, to the point where he gets called a Russian propagandist. And so Karp is similar. Karp is, I think he falls in a similar boat there. And so then the connection with Palantir and Israel, then with that background, the connection with Palantir and Israel had their own really shitty version of Palantir. Because like the thing about Israeli technology and stuff is it's actually not that great. They have like a couple of things that they're very, very good at, but then in general, it's just total slop. And there's two programs that they were using for the targeting that they were doing for their bombings. And the programs are called Lavender and Daddy's Home. Daddy's Home it's such a morbid name for it. These people are twisted. What the reason they named it that is because it was the program was used to, they would identify the location for the person that they wanted to bomb, and then they would wait until the guy came home and they would bomb his home. But these were not precise targeting programs. They were really indiscriminate. So this is why the early bombings that you saw in after October 7th were just these total like waylaying entire neighborhoods, just indiscriminate bombings happening all over the place, because they had shitty tech that they didn't care that it wasn't precise, because they don't care about mass casualties.
Yeah, it's also it's one of those, it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. Exactly. Aspects. It wasn't until either 2023 or 2024, I believe, that they began using Palantir. And from my understanding, I'm borrowing a lot on stuff that Stormy Waters has talked about with this, from conversations he's had with people. And I followed up on a number of the things he said and found them validated, and his predictions on a lot of stuff have been very good. So you could take this with a grain of salt, but they were not Israel beginning to use Palantir was not Israel's decision. It was a decision that was foisted upon them. And the reasoning for that, who knows? But you could kind of draw some connections here that perhaps this was number one, a way to, you could see this as a pro-Israel or anti-Israel position, a way to cut down on the casualties because it's really, really bad PR. And so we need to go find the terrorists and kill them. It's okay if you go find the terrorists and kill them, but you shouldn't be leveling city blocks as you do it. It's bad PR. It turns the world against you. Yada yada yada. That'd be like the pro-Israel perspective on it. The maybe more anti-Israel, if we're going to be rough with our categories here, the anti-Israel perspective might be that there were American interests who wanted to have more direct operational control over what was happening there. And
they don't want activities there to be a black box. So by moving the mechanism into something that in which Americans, whether private or public sector, exercise more control, they get a window and a lever.
Right, exactly. So a lot of the commentariat has been like, oh, Palantir is an Israeli thing to come infest our country. And as far as I understand, it's more the other way around. Palantir was something that was forced upon Israel. They were forced to begin using it. And I mean, this shouldn't necessarily be, this isn't to say, oh, well, that's actually good and these are our friends. I think that they're mostly just probably broadly speaking with the tech, the tech right. The best way to think of them is there's these categories that I've put in. I've put together. There's the friends, there's the allies, and there's the enemies. And I think that they are people. You could put together a list of things that you might find personally disturbing or distasteful or whatever about them, because there is a substantial list there. But that's not why they're enemies. That's why they're allies. If that list didn't exist, they'd be friends. But the list does exist, so they're allies. Because probably the best way to describe them would be that they are more or less indifferent to us. They're not hostile to us and our interests. They're actually willing to, we have many interests that are aligned, like the preservation of American sovereignty, which would be because this is where this is where they have all their stuff. This is where when you have the moneyed interests that are invested in American assets, that have their interests embedded in American assets, they don't want to see things like mass migration completely destabilizing everything. They don't want to see economic collapses. They don't want to see
they can't continue to
bankruptcy.
hold their power and to develop what they want to develop or realize their visions. We talked about this in previous streams. If everything is falling apart around you, there has to be a certain degree of social cohesion. And as we've talked about in the past, you've got this whole idea of power blocks and opponents, the globalist system of no borders, and the constant interpenetration of different groups and different interests doesn't work when you've got to develop military technology to counteract another party. It's it's the tech version of saying that we have to have our own steel production here. What if we need to build tanks and we're waiting for it to be shipped over from China? You can't do that. Likewise, you can't have everything falling apart around you. There has to be some national standard. Yeah. Anyway.
Right. So then within that context, the conversation about Musk and Doge, I think that I think your assessment of Doge is I would share that this was I can't remember if I said this publicly on my show or if it was in like a private voice chat in my Discord community. I spend so much time talking, it's hard to remember where all of it happened. But I speculated pretty early on. I think that the real thrust of the Doge thing, like the actual intent, the mason jar, was data collection. It was getting access to these troves of data, both to train models and to be able to influence the military development of AI. And Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz have even said this almost explicitly, that they're one of the biggest reasons they turned on the Biden / Kamala, the Democrats in general, and backed Trump, was because of their concerns about the previous administration's approach to AI and quote unquote crypto, and them recognizing that the U.S. government not taking this seriously and being really proactive on both of those fronts amounted to a massive national security risk. So yeah, I think your assessment of Doge is I share it completely. Musk and Trump's falling out. That also, I think probably the most believable take that I saw on this, that I kind of have just chosen to insert into my headcanon because there's no way to really know otherwise, is that there was an agreement that Trump and Elon, as soon as Elon left, for the reasons you gave and others, that it would be prudent for them to create some distance, to create some space between them. And I think there are legitimate disputes. I think the stuff that Elon has mentioned, the stuff that concerns him, I don't think he cares about the Tesla or the EV credit thing. I don't think he gives a shit about that. As long as it isn't used to disproportionately target Tesla, as long as it's everyone, as long as it affects everyone, he doesn't care. I think that's sort of like the easy narrative. I think the concerns about I think he probably is not on board with the scale of the mass deportations. I think his expressions about the H-1B thing, I think those were legitimate. The whole H-1B thing in December, I think that was legitimate. And then the debt, the problem with the debt, I think the reason he mass posts Milton Friedman, I think he genuinely does believe that. And he is legitimately concerned about that. And so I do think that they agreed there needed to be some space, and they were going to kind of have a little fallout. And then Elon, being a total spurg, just like, he totally overdid it. I can just imagine the guys in the White House being like, looking at that tweet, because the thing about like Trump is on the Epstein list, that strikes me as the sort of thing that you would do if your goal is to do, it's like a big salacious production to be like, oh, look how awful and bad this is. But in reality, it's completely toothless. It doesn't go anywhere because it's like, it's completely unbelievable. If there was actual legitimate substantial evidence in there that that implicated Trump, there's no way we wouldn't have seen it after 10 years. It would
Oh, yeah,
absolutely be
that's
mass publicity. And
they wouldn't be waiting until after his third presidential run. Yeah.
right,
No
right.
way.
And then and also, like, it's massively self-incriminating too, because it's like you had this guy who you knew is on the Epstein list and is implicated in the Epstein list, and you just had your little boy just kind of running around with him all over the place, and you worked really closely with him. And it was like a month ago that Elon's tweeting that he loves Donald Trump more than like as much as a heterosexual man could love another man, like all of this stuff. And then he tweets he's on the Epstein list. That struck me as the sort of thing that you would do if you're trying to create a big performative drama that ultimately doesn't go anywhere.
And he did. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened. Where did it go? Nowhere. Yeah. You've just got now a partial rapprochement where Musk is like, I regret some things I said. And then Trump is asked, can you ever, get back together with Elon or whatever, or, have some sort of reconciliation? And he's like, perhaps, and now nobody talks about it because everything has been pushed on by the subsequent steps of the news cycles, as they're called. So Musk seems to be out for now. Thiel is staying quiet. They got their hands on the data. It seems it's not like Palantir or any of Musk's undertakings are losing federal contracts or funding. Although Trump did, hint at such things when the spat was in full bloom momentarily. Is there anything else really to say about the Tech Bro group? Oh, I know who I should ask you about, who came up in early days. It's someone that I always deeply disliked. You weren't quite so skeptical of him, I think, as I was and still am. But what the hell's going on with Ramalama Ding Dong in Ohio?
Oh, yeah. That's there was a point at which I said that like shortly after his infamous tweet in December during the whole H-1B dust up.
Yeah, I should say that you and I talked about him well before any of that.
Yeah. And he at that point, my read on it was, he stepped in it. This is a bad tweet. There were things about it that I actually kind of agreed with. But he was not the person to deliver that message, and it was terrible timing. And but at the same time, I also was well aware that the people that he put off with it are not a substantial electoral constituency, and that generally, if you see the rallies when that he would attend and when he would give his big barn burning speeches, and just how much the average normie American just adored him, because there's still within the preponderance of Trump's like normie base, there's still a huge substance of the sentiment where it's like the people who are embarrassed to be white, and you love it when you see the token minority who's saying all the things that you wish you could say. That's very much present still, and I would say will be for at least a decade longer, probably.
I mean, what else does he have other than pharmaceutical opportunism and
right.
weird hairdo?
And then since then, he has just repeatedly stuck his foot in his mouth over and over and over again. It has gotten. There was a time there where he was saying lots of really good stuff consistently. Occasionally he'd say something that's kind of a little cringy. It was like boomer red meat stuff. And I think you can't discount the fact that he and JD are legitimate friends. And whether you read that as an elevation for Vivek or a demotion for JD is, your mileage may vary, but they are very close. JD literally named one of his sons after Vivek. So they've been friends since college. They've known each other for a very long time. So I don't think that Vivek's going to disappear off the political scene, but I am now much less. That for a while there, I was like, yeah, he's doing and saying some dumb stuff, but the hoi polloi Republican voter really, really likes him. I think he's a shoo-in for the Ohio governorship. I still think he's probably pretty likely going to get it, but he has done substantial damage to himself and revealed himself to be uh, the worst case scenario of what he could be. His most recent tweet about what's his name? Why can I not think of any of these people's names tonight?
You're not old enough to have that problem. You know?
Yeah. The politician from the 60s, civil rights era, conservative.
Oh my. Oh wow.
I can't remember. It was
did Vivek recently tweet about a conservative politician?
George Lincoln Rockwell.
From
Rockwell.
Yeah,
I didn't want to say I said conservative because I didn't want to say we're on YouTube. He drew a comparison to him and Newsom. He said that he was like, I like Newsom. I think I like Newsom as a person, but the way he's going, he's doing all these bad things the same way as George Lincoln Rockwell. I was just like, dude, how do you possibly think that this is gonna take you like?
Yeah, Vivek, man. Well, yeah, all I can say, since we're leaving the tech bro subject, unless something comes up you want to cover, of course do so. But there was just something that came through. Apparently, I haven't checked it all yet. Again, this is one of those situations where it's something that, just came across the radar briefly on social media, and I haven't had a chance to check it yet. I stayed up all night fulminating about, foreign adventurism. And so, I've just gotten 5 hours of sleep and got up shortly before this stream because, I'm not a day walker.
I'm the same.
So I have not checked all of these things, but it does seem that there are claims appearing that the Iranians have uncovered a whole aspect of Mossad operations in their own country, and it involves very, very close cooperation between the Israeli intelligence services and Indian intelligence services. They've got such a surplus population that they pump everywhere, and they play such a role in the tech sector. And if you know anything about Indian society, everyone's got an uncle to whom they owe allegiance and, for whom they work within clan structures or family structures and the rest, more often clan, so far as I understand it. So Indians all over the place, particularly in the tech sector, are quietly working for intelligence services. And I thought to myself, man, it's a good thing we don't have a lot of Indians and a lot of Indians in the tech sector. So keep your eyes open for that, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I'm not sure about all of it, but it makes perfect sense. It would explain why we constantly see really supportive pro-Israel tweets from what at least purport to be Indian accounts. A lot of people have mentioned things like, I understand that they've got a problem with Pakistan, and they could therefore see, the Hindutva Indian nationalists could see this whole thing with having to go up against an opponent that's a Muslim country as indicating that they're a natural fit and ally with Israel. But this goes a lot further towards explaining it. All right, well, we have a bit of time left. I don't want to keep you too long. I just wanted to get your take on what's going on with all this business with Iran and Israel. For my part, there's some really, the more you know about how the narratives get spun up and inserted, the more you shouldn't be surprised by it. But somehow I remain not surprised, but irritated by it. There's some posts from, official mouthpieces, White House accounts and the rest. President Trump has consistently said over the years that, Iran must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And I'm like, okay, great. So if anybody bitches about him bombing a foreign country, the answer is, what's wrong with you? He's consistently said this forever. And I'm like, well, what else has been consistently said literally since 1992. So that's what, 30 years now, 31 years. 30, 30 plus years. Netanyahu and others have been saying over and over again that they're a couple of years away, or sometimes they say months away. I did a search for, congressmen, senators, U.S. presidents, and Netanyahu himself, and the number of times that they've said that Iran is about to get a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's more times than Al Gore has said that, we're about to be covered in sheets of ice or boiled alive. And it's 18. And, it's a few months. It's 1 or 2 years, or, it could be weeks. This shit has been going on forever. And mind you, I'm not saying that Iran isn't working on a nuclear weapon. Absolutely, they could be. The last thing I'd do is, the only people in life that I've dealt with who are more difficult to deal with, who are playing all sorts of negotiation games, the only people I've met that are more difficult than Persians, Iranians, are Persian Jews.
Yeah.
And I mean, I bought a house from one once, and the next morning I saw a spread in my city newspaper, the Atlanta Urinal Constipation. It had a full page spread, and I'm looking at my house that I bought from this Persian Jew who refused to come down. I mean, it was a nice house, but the neighborhood, it was terrible. And it had, a picture of my house, and it says, Capitol View home sells for more than any Capitol View home has ever sold in history. And I'm all like, yeah, I thought I was cool coming from the Grand Bazaar, having some experience in Turkey, and they worked me. So I do not mean to suggest that I'm like, oh, Iran isn't working on a nuclear weapon and they're great people. No, absolutely they could be. But the thing is that they've been telling us that they're, days, weeks, moments away from having a nuclear weapon forever. And the bottom line is that it seems to me, anyway, that the bottom line is that Trump is under enormous pressure, because you don't get to just do whatever you want without doing certain things, particularly as related to U.S. foreign policy and the broader Middle East, on Israel's behalf. It doesn't happen. You're gone. And I think part of the reason why we haven't seen these, these Antifa Summer of Love, no King's Day type things get bigger, is because there's a certain amount of funding that pro-Israel forces are able to disperse or withhold. And in this situation, they just don't want it happening when Trump is in the midst of doing seemingly what they want him to do. A lot of people say that Trump was attempting to mislead the Iranians and make them feel a false sense of security right before the Israeli attack, so that they could be taken unawares. I think that's complete bullshit. He flatly, 2 days before, he began to pull everybody out of diplomatic stuff in the region, and he was saying this could get bad now. We want people out. I don't know what's going to happen. If you're sitting there trying to lull people into a sense of complacency so that a surprise attack can be effected, you don't pull all your diplomatic staff out of the region 2 days before. So that, I think, is bullshit. Also, I was a little more pissed off about it because, I'm like, they did this on a Friday and they were supposed to be meeting again on a Sunday. Somebody pointed out to me, and it's fair, that Trump did say, and I'd seen the tweet, he's like, I told them 60 days. And I just thought that was a post facto justification throwaway tweet. But I went and dug into it, and it was reported back in March. And Axios and some others talked about. There are many discussions of it that I had somehow missed. He did tell them 60 days, and I, calculated it out, and it was one day after 60 days. So that part of it, fine. The bottom line is, I don't want to get involved in any more fucking wars, and not for Israel, certainly, but not for anyone else. Not on behalf of the European Union or BlackRock or whatever in Ukraine. I want this shit over. So I think, sorry, just laying out my take on it so you can, come back at me. I do think that he might be about to pull a rabbit out of a hat. I do think that it is impossible to fully separate what he's trying to do with China, what he's trying to do with Russia, from what he's trying to do with Iran and with Ukraine. I think all of these things are tied together. I don't think you can just simply come in and pull right here and deal with this. And I think he understands that. There have been times in the past when he's talked about, it's not just a great big beautiful bill where you put it all in one thing. It's also a great big beautiful deal. And he is trying to work something out. The Russians are at least staying quiet, and relatively so, at least publicly, and they're staying out of it while intensifying their own campaign in Ukraine, while the U.S. is focused and the news is focused on these other things. You could easily argue that what's going on with Iran has to do with putting more pressure on Russia and China. Russia's going to gain if in some respects, in terms of oil prices going up, and already has gained from the threat of conflict in the region. The United States is, of course, a major exporter of energy. And if shit gets weird in the Persian Gulf, then, we can sell for more as well. The issue is shit's going to go up at the pump. And that's going to have real effects on Trump's economic project. But China is the country that's really going to be screwed if that area gets messed up. Also, China and Russia are going to suffer with their north-south route and these other plans that they have. Also, they need Iran to keep this sort of this West Asian projection into what we call the Middle East in order to maintain influence there, especially with Russia having been pushed back considerably in Syria. So perhaps this is something designed to put so much pressure on China and Russia because of the implications, particularly China, that China is forced to come and put pressure on Iran. But I'm not sure about that. It also could be, as some people have opined, not with any certainty. Alex Craner, I'm not saying he's not a shit lib, but he's got some, I've found his thinking on many things to entirely mirror mine. When he has thought of things that I didn't think of already, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting take and could be. Not saying he's right. And again, not saying that I agree with all of his takes and political positions, but I think his geopolitical hypotheses are generally sound and very much mirror my own. He seems to think that it still could be, as of the latest thing I saw with him, that it still could be some sort of trap where you're giving the Israelis enough rope to cause problems for themselves. Maybe. But saying things like unconditional surrender and, the people we negotiated with are dead, and that kind of bluster, even though we're used to it in many respects from Trump, is you don't just do that without creating repercussions and affecting your ability to make deals with people in the future. And all signs indicate to me that the likelihood that we are going to be even more directly involved, because let's not pretend that we aren't directly involved with the bombing campaigns and the rest, that likelihood is increasing. And I do not like it at all. And I feel as though this has been, or is unfolding as a kind of betrayal of the base in terms of his stuff about no more ridiculous wars. A lot of people come in, again, Trump has been saying this forever. You need to clean your ears out. Yeah, he's been saying also that we don't need any more stupid wars. I distinctly remember him on stage with Jeb Bush when he turned and just hammered into Jeb Bush about all of that. And I was like, good God, someone finally said it. And I was with him from that point forward, voted for him 3 times, been a public supporter of him for 10 years. But this is a bit much, even for me. So what are your thoughts, sir? Shed a golden light upon this that will calm my troubled spirit.
Well, okay, let's see. There's a whole bunch of different things here. I'll preface by saying that this is generally outside the immediate goings on within the Middle East and the history of it and everything. I know more than the average bear, but it's generally outside my expertise, and so I largely am relying on listening to other people. I've listened to some of your streams where you've talked about it and gone through all the different players in the region and stuff. And that's, some of these are just details that I can't. They just get forced out when I put other stuff into my head. So I'm looking at it more from a both from drawing on what other people are saying, kind of stitching together in a way that makes sense to me, and then looking at it from sort of a narrative point of view from what I do understand of the other elements that are at play, particularly the grand economic reordering that's happening. Because at his heart, Trump is a businessman. Like that's why he loves making deals. His art form, he said this explicitly, his art form is making deals. He wants to make deals. He lives to make deals. He is a businessman at heart. So when he's engaged in these sorts of negotiations, he's even been saying this explicitly lately, like with India and Pakistan, that he uses trade as a bludgeon to force negotiation and settling of military conflicts. That's the way he sees. That's the way he wants to approach these sorts of things. He also just recently did his big Middle East tour, which conspicuously avoided Israel. And interestingly, in that tour, he was received as an absolute king. There's one video, I don't know if you saw this. This is one video, I don't remember which state he was in.
The women with the hair.
There was the women with the hair. There was also, did you see the one where the military officers were lining up, walking up to him and saluting him? He had foreign Arab military officers in a long line walking up and saluting him directly, which I thought was particularly for Arab culture, that for what I understand of Arab culture, that seemed fairly profound, more than just some kind of like, hey, we're going to be respectful to the guests. They're actually lining up and saluting the commander of another country's military.
Yeah, I guess we're not the only ones who do that.
Yes. Right.
Or giving 50-minute or 50 standing ovations and however many minutes long, Netanyahu's speech was. Yeah, but that was significant. And of course, on that same trip, like for example, in Saudi Arabia, he was giving long speeches and talking about how neocons bring us into needless wars. But go on, sir.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to say. Is he gave that great speech where he explicitly and openly condemned the nation building and the bringing in a bunch of different institutions to try to build up your society and change your culture and everything. And no, you need to maintain your culture, and it's not our place to be getting involved in all of that. So there's that. One question I had for you before I go to some of the other things: do you remember the details of the agreement that was signed between Russia and Iran a few months ago, that was essentially kind of bringing Iran more formally under the nuclear protection?
The thing is that it's not a full alliance insofar as so far as what I've seen.
Right.
Basically, the hard terms are things like if there is a war, if anybody goes to war with Iran, Russia is not going to help the parties that are going to war with Iran. It's not like a full reciprocal alliance, but outside the specific terms of it, which I don't remember particularly well. I looked over what you could publicly see about what's in it. But outside of that, it does seem that Russia is helping Iran. They certainly sent over, or almost certainly sent over, radar systems, which help them with, identifying incoming shit. And presumably that requires operation by Russian technicians. So the Russians do seem to be helping them to some extent with radar and defense. I don't know whether or not that extended to, area denial systems, air defense and the rest. There are some people who said it has. A lot of other people argue that Iran is in any case not going to have too much of that stuff. A lot of it is their own indigenous production. Maybe they have some old S-300s. I don't know if they have any S-400s or more recent ones. So I don't remember all of the terms, but it is not a full reciprocal defense treaty. There's plenty of room for Russia to maintain a certain amount of distance in it. Trump has come in and said things like, yeah, it'd be great if Putin could come in and act in a mediating role. And they did have a phone call, and presumably some aspects of this were discussed. But they have called off further working group interactions about resolving the situation in Ukraine. Meantime, Putin has basically escalated his attacks, not in some enormous way, but some of the biggest based on the numbers we're given, who knows, with any numbers that come out of any of these war zones. But based on the numbers that were given, huge attacks involving, the largest numbers of missiles and drones thus far on places like Kiev, which makes sense if they assume, a lot of these Patriot missiles and, your reloads for your THAADs or whatever the air defense systems have been moved to Israel in order to deal with these contingencies. So Russia and Iran, we can't be sure what's going to happen there. I would imagine that it is in Russia's interest to defend Iran because of economic plans in the future, their desire to keep a projection into that place, some of their economic logistical corridor plans. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, you've got the whole idea of Trump trying to get one big, beautiful deal and this whole way in which these various elements are intertwined. So it's entirely possible that, I'm not saying this is the case, but I absolutely would not rule out the possibility that Trump said, look, if you want to get what you want in in Ukraine, then we need to get what we want in Iran. Putin is certainly not going to be able, because of his treaty obligations, to assist the United States, but he could slow walk support to them in such a fashion that their shit falls apart. One last thing to add, because I know you wanted to bring up some other points, and after all, this is an interview with you, so forgive me, but there is the fog of war as related to all of these things. Everybody has to understand how enormous it is. Like, everyone's talking about how there's a corridor that's been cut that allows, the Israeli jets to fly unhindered and bomb whatever they want in Iran. And I did a search, under trending topics, and came all these fucking stupid videos with AI of jets doing all kinds of tumbles and rolls directly over Tehran, and it looks like the Blue Angels doing something, and they've got like overdubbed almost Star Wars sounds. We don't know what's happening. Maybe they are. Maybe they enjoy that freedom of motion. As I said, we don't know, but there's every reason to believe that a lot of what Israel hit was decoys. There's every reason to believe that Iran has more defenses, having been planning for this for quite some time. It seems quite clear that they maintain the ability to hit Israel itself. I don't think that all the footage we've seen of hypersonic missiles coming down amidst other more slow moving ones, 1 out of every 20 being one of these ones that just comes in like a thunderbolt. I don't think all of that is fake. So as of today, the Iranians or their proxies who speak in the media are saying that Iran maintains considerable military leverage, and it can still do many things. And people say that their proxies have all been taken out, and I'm like, no, they haven't. The proxies in Iraq, if indeed what they are proxies, let's say allies of some kind in what they call the resistance, they're not all gone. Now, I'm not saying they're decisive or they're going to turn the tables, but they're not gone. And everyone's like, yeah, Hezbollah has been defeated. No, it hasn't. It's been pushed out of some of its areas. It's suffered blows, but their fighting force is still substantially there. They're like, oh, the Yemenis have been taken care of. No, they haven't. And Trump basically went in there and said he was going to bomb the shit out of me. And Trump turned around and said, wow, yeah, they really fight well. And, we worked something out where they said, just stop. They said, just stop. Yemen's not done. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe they have been hit exactly as hard as the Israelis have claimed. Also, maybe not, because I don't see them yet suing for peace.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, virtually everything you said there is aligns with my perception of everything, particularly the idea of Russia just kind of slow walking and doing the like trading Iran for Ukraine sort of thing, which is there's a pattern that I've seen with Trump. Now I'm starting to notice it, where you have these two sides that are negotiating, and here he comes in as the the mediator, or the guy facilitating the negotiations. So you have Russia, Ukraine, and you've got Israel, Iran. And he's made almost identical comments with both of them, where Ukraine did their big, massive drone attack on all the Russian aircraft. And Trump's response to that was basically to the effect of, well, that's going to give Russia, now that you did that, Russia is basically entitled to their own response. And then with Israel and Iran, he made the comment that, sometimes they've just got to fight it out.
And he did indeed say they've got to fight it out like kids about Ukraine as well.
Yes.
The exact same phrase in both cases. Yes.
Yes.
But he's less in that direction now vis-a-vis Israel and Iran, which is why it's entirely unclear to me.
And I think perhaps this is because I think there is sort of a, number one, it's pretty well documented at this point that he and Netanyahu fucking hate each other. They have massive contempt for one another. And but I think in this case, they may both want to see, they may both have their sights set on Iran, but for separate reasons. Bibi obviously has his own insane reasons. And then I think Trump's focus on Iran is probably much more associated with China, and with the Belt and Road Initiative, and also trying to pull Russia and China apart from each other. Because I think after he had the call with Putin called Khomeini and told him, there was a report. I don't know how valid it is, all of this stuff. Yeah. But he told him basically, you're fucked. You need to button this up. And we're not stepping in. There was another report also that Russia and China aren't going to get involved on Iran's behalf. Again, these are reports, and any of this could change. They could be fake, whatever. Same goes with all of the stuff I'm saying. So if you're looking at this through the lens of the grand economic reordering, Trump goes and does this big tour through the Middle East, signs all these big deals and everything with the different Middle Eastern countries, conspicuously avoids Israel. And I'm inclined to kind of believe, or to side with Luongo on his take that Trump wants to save Israel from Netanyahu, that he wants Netanyahu gone. But he doesn't, like, anybody who thought that Trump was going to come in and be anti-Israel was smoking.
Yeah,
something.
absolutely not. I never expected that. I never, ever. I just figured that would be the foreign policy price we have to pay in order to get anything at home. You know, what is it in Turkish? They aç ayı oynamaz. A hungry bear doesn't juggle. You know, you got to feed the fucker. And so I figured that was the case. I just did not think that the foreign policy price was going to be as high as it looks like it's going to be.
Right. So he may want to save Israel, or he wants to save Israel. He wants to protect Israel. He wants Israel to be great place, which incidentally, I think maybe the best way to handle them, despite them being basically impossible to handle. There's no solution for the Israeli problem. There's no temporal Christian solution for the Israeli problem.
Sorry, yes, no Christian one. Yes, go on.
But you probably, the best way to handle them is to take away their bailiwicks. And so if you're not going to be able to get a final solution with them, perhaps you just kind of get it into a treading water sort of situation. That's one of my kind of speculations on it. But clearly Bibi needs this a lot more than Trump does. Even with Trump's rhetoric, it's also been very extremely bombastic. It's been like over the top bombastic. And if him following the sequence of events as you laid it out, that we're having these negotiations, you have the starting point of his focus on this is trade. It's also about realigning the entire global order. Besant has talked about countries are going to get put into 3 categories: red light, yellow light, green light. And this is like immediately under the imperial umbrella is the green light category. Yellow light category is like, we'll let you into part of it. So you're going to get access to the dollar system. You're going to get access to military protection. You're going to get access to, you get to be within the walled garden we're creating. If you're in the green category, you basically are you are now part of the United States effectively, from an economic perspective. This is sort of like you're contracting the empire by expanding it. So you're contracting it in one sense, but you're expanding it in a separate sense. This is the green category. Then the yellow category would be someone who's not necessarily the closest ally, but we're not open enemies. You're not completely getting the palm, getting pushed out. And then the red category would be you're out. So looking at it through that lens, you see, okay, so there's these negotiations happening. Trump says 60 days. At the end of 60 days, literally the next day, Israel does this big attack. Trump starts withdrawing all the diplomatic assets and everything as quickly as possible. And and then crucially, the people who were taken out in the first attack were the negotiators. And I think when Trump saying the people we were negotiating with are dead was him. I think that was an expression of sort of like resigned annoyance. Like, okay, well, we were doing all this negotiating. It looked like we were getting close to a deal, and perhaps Iran is dragging their feet on something, but we're getting close to a deal. We hit the 60-day mark. Israel goes, and not only do they do this attack, but they actually kill the people we were negotiating with. And now everything needs to reset. You could look at it from that perspective, or it could be the flip side, that we're negotiating with these people. We're not getting anywhere with them. So Trump's going to let the attack dog off the leash. All right, I gave you 60 days. You're champing at the bit. Go do your thing. You take out the people we were negotiating with, and now we're going to negotiate with someone more reasonable. Perhaps that's the perspective. I also note that there has been, as you kind of indicated, there's been a massive, massive fog of war propaganda push here that is maybe more blatant than any that I've ever seen. There are constant reports, largely from Axios, which is interesting, and then Israeli media reports that are getting debunked constantly in real time, that are all clearly geared toward, it's unnamed Israeli official says, or Israeli media outlet reports unnamed U.S. official saying. And all of these are all indicating that the U.S. is far more advanced and committed to this than other signs seem to indicate. It seems as if there's a massive Israeli campaign to pull the United States into war. And if Trump was gung-ho about this, as gung-ho about this as he's publicly messaging he is, I don't see the purpose in the big sustained Israeli media campaign. That to me smacks very much of Netanyahu's typical, that's like, this is his playbook, pulling on all of his different assets and trying to corner an American president into doing what he wants them to do. And clearly this is an existential thing for him, because he's wildly unpopular within his country. His ruling coalition's collapsing. He's gotten this temporary reprieve for like 6 months, and he's got to get something done. I'll also...
Well, yeah, I would just add right there, I'm not so sure that he's wildly unpopular. He's got a domestic opposition, much of it funded by the, Rainbow Dildo crew.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I don't know. I'm no expert on internal Israeli politics, but I doubt he is quite that unpopular. He does have issues with his coalition, at least superficially. That's for sure. And I would say, to be fair, yeah, I think there's probably more of the division in Israeli society than we have seen for quite some time. But I don't know yet that he's wildly unpopular. But go on, sir.
Okay, yeah. That's, as I said at the top. This is I'm getting virtually all of this is stuff that I'm collecting from all the different people that I listen to.
This is good. Keep marching towards the insights, sir.
The other thing that I've noticed starting to crop up, and I still have no idea where this is coming from. It's pretty obviously a Woodpit in the chat says U.S. officials keep denying these reports. Yeah, that's the other thing is when U.S. officials are actually speaking on the record, they are denying the things that are being said off the record. And so my understanding, based on how all this stuff has happened before, and understanding that right now within the ruling party in the United States, there's a pretty hard split between like avowed completely degenerate Zionists and extreme Zionist skeptics, to put it mildly. This kind of the strange coalition that Trump has assembled, and this is the
right. And we see the fracture with the upcoming interview. It seems that this is what's going to be delivered, given the teaser that was put out, which I have to say I did enjoy, of Tucker Carlson talking to Ted Cruz. Yeah. So yeah. There
I
is
love
that.
Tucker. He's one of those guys that just I can't get enough of Tucker. I think he's I think he's great. There's these reports now of and even a video posted by the grandson of the Shah talking about. Have you seen these?
No, but I did hear about them. Of course, the grandson of the Shah has been groomed for quite some time as a pro-Israel replacement. But I understood that there were.
I was going to ask you about that because I don't know anything about.
I don't know that for sure either, because to be honest with you, I haven't looked into this figure. I've only heard him reported, and it was reported by sort of I'm not going to say it was Jeffrey Sachs, but he was being discussed as a figure by that whole crew that sort of Judge Napolitano, Alexander Mercouris, Jeffrey Sachs, Dialogue Works, Neutrality Studies. Yeah, that kind of crew.
So then I guess if I was to go into complete speculation land here, clearly it's very obvious to me that he's been groomed by someone, and it seems as if the pieces are being laid out here for his installation. Do a big thing, the return of the Shah and all of that. And is it possible that Russia has come on board with this, and they would be happy to have to maintain their relationship with Iran with him installed there as well, and there's more alignment perhaps between the leadership and the people, because Iran, as I understand it, Iran is basically the exact opposite of Iraq, where Iraq was a largely pretty devout, culturally Muslim country with a more secular leadership, whereas Iran is the exact opposite, where the country itself, the people are much more secular, more liberalized, and then the leadership is much more religious fundamentalist. It seems to me that regime change in Iran is absolutely going to happen. And then the only question is who's in favor of it, who's not. And then is that a thing where maybe China would not want it? And this is kind of driving a wedge between Russia and China, where Russia is willing to accept this regime change in Iran, and this is part of the grand deal with Ukraine. So they're going to get what they want with Ukraine, and they'll take their lumps in Iran. And but this is going to, and they're willing to do that because of what they get with Ukraine, and they're willing to start parting ways again with China, because that relationship has already been pretty strained to begin with for a long history. These are some of the things that I've been kind of speculating on, and I think that there is, given Trump's history, the behavior of his first administration, the fact that I think there's no possible way that we're going to get substantial boots on the ground in Iran. I think there's 0% chance of that happening. I think that having American air assets go in and bomb things, I think that there's a very good likelihood of that. Trump has shown he's willing to do this first term and second term. He bombed Syria. He bombed ISIS. He bombed the Houthis multiple times. He assassinated Soleimani. He's shown a total willingness to engage in targeted bombings, and he's talked about the fact that his viewpoint on military action is, if you're going to engage in it, then the whole regime change, nation building thing, all of that is stupid and silly. But if you're going to go in, go hit them hard and get out. So I think that would be consistent with that. My biggest concern right now is it's setting up way too neatly for them moving the Nimitz from Taiwan over to the Gulf, and it's set to be decommissioned next year. And I think the prime candidates for it, actually, I don't think it would be Israel that would facilitate. Maybe they'd be involved in it, but it would be the French, and it would be the Davos crowd, generally speaking, who I could see it's totally within their playbook to do the whole false flag thing. And if they really wanted to not just draw America into a war, but break Trump's coalition, then having a false flag on the Nimitz and taking it out would be that would be the thing that I would be most concerned about.
Yeah, it would certainly put a pin in the map in terms of the collective experience in the United States, in the sense that they have to respond. But I would add, they don't need a false flag. I mean, hypersonic missile coming at the Nimitz, and it's done.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I mean, yeah, hitting it. I guess.
Yeah, setting it up in such a fashion where you know it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess the other thing I would mention is that the hypersonic missiles made me think of this. It's easy to get really down into the minute by minute things that are happening and kind of lose context sometimes. So I'll add this point of context that we are in, how many days has it been now? 5 days? I don't know.
Somewhere like that. Yeah. A week.
Where Tel Aviv is getting railed by hypersonic missiles and has been for close to a week. And in any previous administration, including the first Trump administration, if there had been a tiny fraction of that, we would have had full mobilization, boots on the ground, draft starting, like it would have been all out pandemonium reacting to it. And here we're almost a week into Tel Aviv getting hammered, and we haven't yet had any sort of formal major American response. Obviously, Americans are involved in all of this, but they're being very disciplined with their messaging that we're here for defensive purposes only, and we're not going to get involved unless an American asset is targeted, which is signaling. It's like, if you really want us to get involved, here's how you do it. Hint, hint, hint over here. But at the same time, if you didn't want to get involved, what would you say? I think you would still say the same thing. So I'm very much in a
we don't know. Yeah, same here. I mean, as far as B-2 bombers could be dropping bunker busters right now. They're stealth bombers. They're never going to tell us about it. So there's no reason to assume that they're not doing that already. And it seems, the scuttlebutt is that there's a multinational coalition force in the skies over Jordan and Iraq and Syria and things, acting to intercept incoming Iranian missiles, and many are still getting through. So, you have to look at it from the perspective of attritional warfare. Trump is coming off of having thought or pretended to think that he could do something decisive with the Houthis or Ansar Allah in order to, push them back. And he hasn't really. The agreement that he struck with them is just that he'll stop shooting at them and they'll stop shooting at the naval assets. The blockade, as I understand it, remains in effect, certainly to some extent, and it is affecting shipping. Everyone's having to go around, the Cape of Good Hope now instead of coming up through the Suez Canal. And so he's coming off of that experience of seeing, oh, wow, there's a limit to what you can do with bombing. And if you look at a map of Iran, just so everyone knows what's going on to a certain extent with all the business about Iran and enriching uranium and trying to hit their nuclear reactors. Props to Operational Art of War, Jimmy Thomas, for pointing this out. An excellent series of Substack articles that I recommend to everyone. I think he's up to his 4th installment now on, what would be involved from an operational perspective. He's a former staff officer or a graduate of Staff Officer War College.
What's his name?
Basically, Jimmy Thomas, or go look for Op Art of War. He's one of the guys I'm following. You can find him. I think it's OPARTOFWAR or something like that. Let me find him. He's pointed out, looking at the map of Iran. If you take a look at the pull up like a Google Earth view of Iran, and then pull up a graphic showing you where the oil producing areas of Iran are. Iran is like a mountainous fortress. It's a nightmare. The biggest thing that Julius Caesar was ever going to undertake was, invading Parthia. And going after the Persians. And he got assassinated while he was preparing to do that. The only Western power that has actually conquered Iran was Alexander the fucking Great. And from the Eastern perspective, Tamerlane, Genghis Khan, those guys were able to do it. But otherwise, we've only had success with toppling governments and installing alternatives. So definitely it's a situation where I agree we're not going to see boots on the ground. Guy from V says, isn't Alamut in Iran? Yeah, it was. That's the famous castle of Hassan Sabah, the old man of the mountain. when Hulagu Khan, one of the successors or generals of Genghis Khan, came in, the Ismailis, the assassins, tried to cut a deal and back off a little bit. Finally, Hulagu Khan got sick of them, marched up there and literally dismantled, sacked the fortress after laying siege to it. The famous, unconquerable fortress of the assassins. Archaeologists go there now, and all they can find is like broken shards of pottery. So the Mongols took care of that shit. But so I say that. I'll get back to the map and the terrain, but the point is that yes, they have to do regime change, because the idea of invading it's a joke. It's not going to happen. Anyone who looks at that map is like, the fuck? I mean, we need a few million men in order to make it happen, and it would be extremely bloody. Mm-hmm. Anyway, coming back to nuclear weapons and the layout of the terrain, as Jimmy Thomas, Top Art of War, pointed out, you look at the map. There is a border region, basically the western regions of Iran, just past the mountains. So they're low-lying country, and it borders on Iraq, and it's outside sort of the mountain fortress walls that the ranges and the high country form. That's where their oil reserves are. So it's closest to Israel, it's adjacent to Iraq, and it's outside their mountain fortress walls, which means their entire energy producing sector, the region, I should say, where the energy producing sector is based, is absolutely vulnerable to relatively easy invasion, which means you don't have to invade all of Iran. All you have to do is cross the border and knock out all that shit and just take that part. And suddenly they've got a country that has the lion's share of its income taken away from it and no longer has its own energy. So they really need nuclear power in order to ensure their survival as a country in the face of that geographic weakness, given the lay of the land. And so you hear people like Trump saying, oh, they got so much oil. Why would they need nuclear power? They don't need nuclear power. They've got all that oil. Well, if they rely only on the oil, that means that it's within Israel or, the United States power to shut that down with a quickness. And they're crippled, running on reserves until it runs out with, very little income to speak of once that happens. So, of course, they want nuclear power. And part of what Russia has been doing has been, to make arrangements with them to set them up to have nuclear power. And so I'm not saying that they're not working on a nuclear bomb. I don't know that. And if I were them, I would be.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, there is a very real existential reason for them to pursue enrichment on their own. If anybody tells you otherwise, tell them to shut the fuck up. Because even if they're in a situation where they have a good relationship with Russia and they have their nuclear power, but they don't do their own enrichment, so they're dependent on uranium delivery, enriched uranium delivery from some third party in order to maintain their nuclear power, they're still in the same situation where they could have their energy and their income cut off. Now, if they have the nuclear power, they can have their income cut off, but they can continue to provide electricity to their citizens and not face total collapse, not only of their logistics and power grid and everything else, but also of their government and their regime. So that by way of an explanation of what's going on in that respect.
That's actually interesting, because it reminded me that before this all kicked off, like maybe a week or so ago, there was some of the reports that were going around were that Steve Witkoff was part of the deal that they were offering was agreeing to partial enrichment of uranium below the threshold for
whatever the 20%, which was higher than they needed for reactors, but would also cover their needs for radioactive treatments, radiation treatments for medicine, cancer, etc. Yeah, right.
And then there were reports that immediately followed that I don't remember. I hadn't thought about this because I didn't understand the situation as well as I do now, and I still hardly understand it. But the reports that came out immediately after that were that the Israelis were not going to accept that, and that Netanyahu was very upset about it, that was part of the deal. And so I based on the data points that I have at my disposal, the narrative sort of falls together rather neatly to me here that Trump and Putin have hammered this out. There already is a mutual understanding on this point that Trump is going to kind of make a big stink, but mostly look the other way as Putin accumulates more territory, and they're going to trade Ukraine for Iran, broadly speaking, and that they're willing to, that the Trump administration's perspective on Iran is we want to work out a trade deal where you don't get to develop a nuclear weapon, but we're happy for you to have lower levels of enrichment. And Israel said to hell with that, and said, if this is the deal that's going to be negotiated, then we're going to strike now. And that's why they went after the people who were doing the negotiating, to also create a cooling effect within Iran. Like, who wants to, the guy ahead of you gets bombed. Who wants to go stand where he was just standing? That narrative kind of it seems to fit the various characters and interests involved. And what I guess I wouldn't understand after that necessarily, I'd have to attribute this for the time being to just Trump doing his madman routine, is why after that Trump would escalate the rhetoric the way he has.
Well, I would imagine that I'm not sure any of this is how it's going to go, because you and I are just speculating. But he has he's going to have to get some kind of. There's going to have to be enough pressure on Israel that it's going to be willing to compromise in some respect. Mm-hmm. And maybe getting, Tel Aviv, and it's not just Tel Aviv, it's certainly Haifa too, and other places. And drones have definitely hit Eilat. And remember that the activities of the Houthis have an ongoing effect upon the economic situation in Israel, as does, war fighting. And a lot of people have left Israel for the time being in order to be somewhere else. I
just saw that there was one of the Israeli officials said that they were not going to be allowing any more Israelis to leave the country.
Oh, well, I mean, that helps, certainly
gotta
when you're going to
keep the meat shields there, right?
Yeah. And at the same time, it gives a great opportunity for, whaling. The Israelis running ads on YouTube can do something different than begging for money for Christians for a change. Begging for money from Christians. Yeah, they just. Anyway, I think that part of the reason why he would escalate the rhetoric would be in order to keep this thing rolling, keep the pressure on. Israel stays in the fight, but Israel gets hammered more and more, and is going to have to be forced to take a look at what its stockpiles are, how long it continue a war of attrition, as many of the Napolitano crew like to talk about, and others like Mercouris, for every incoming missile that has to be dealt with, you've got to fire out 2 of these missile interceptors. You do the math and you look at the production rates for this, even if they've changed, even if they had bigger stockpiles, than we were publicly told, which is likely. Even if they can produce more than we think they can, there's still going to be a point at which, the math just isn't going to work out. But by the same token, we could see that, it was a lot of bluster on the part of Iran, that they don't have as many missiles. Certainly some have to have been destroyed at this point. Certainly their air defenses have to have been significantly degraded. So you're going to see, what the cracking point is. And I agree with you for the reasons I mentioned, the terrain and the rest, the fact that no one else has conquered them, properly speaking, with boots on the ground, other than Alexander the Great, 2,300 years ago or whatever. That means that we're not going to go in with boots on the ground. We may be bombing them now. We probably will be in future. But regime change is the only option. I tend to think, you said you feel like it's inevitable. Maybe it is. We could easily wake up tomorrow and find out that, wow, the shit's just fallen apart. I tend to think, though, it's not. I don't think they're going to be able to do a regime change. And if they come in, these yes, they have a highly secular society, but there are a lot of true Shiite believers. They're all 12er Shiites. And if you come in and, kill their holy man, you've got, it's not going to be the same holy man. People don't understand Shiites aren't just Shiites. The Ismailis in Iran, the Nizari Ismailis, a subsect of the Ismailis, what happens with the Shiites is they basically follow bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
So Ali married Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, and there were people in that bloodline. And so depending on what kind of Shiite you are, you settled upon one of those people, like, the Jafar al-Sadiq, right? The wise imam in that bloodline, or Ismail, or, so if it's the 5th imam, they call them fivers. If it's the 12th imam in that bloodline, they call them 12ers. Like the Ismailis, they call them 7ers because they're the 7th imam. So if you come in and whack the 12ers current religious leader, it's going to affect things like the Marsh Arabs who are Shiites in Iraq and the rest, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Yemenis are going to care all that much. The Aga Khan and his people in Britain or in East Africa, they're not really going to care that much. But you're going to have an effect, a very serious effect, killing a religious leader in a country of 90 million people. I mean, you could say that they are more secular, but all you have to do is look at a Muharram parade, for example, in Britain, where you'll see them. They remember the Battle of Karbala, when one of Ali's children, I can't remember if it was Hassan or Hussein, was killed, and they see it as a terrible time period. And so they commemorate it yearly by doing these public marches where they whip themselves with scourges until they bleed. So I tend to think that it would be a huge mistake if they off Khomeini, but they're going to have to do it by air attack, and with their assets on the ground in the country. The Iranians are making claims about having captured operatives. They also apparently have some female F-35 pilot, if they're not lying, and maybe they are. And they're apparently going to release some expose interview with her where she talks about what's really going on. They claim to be rounding up all kinds of Indian operatives, as we talked about previously. We'll see what happens with it. Yes, a regime change is the only way. Yes, I don't think we're going to see boots on the ground there. Yes, we probably are going to be seeing bombing. The only place where I differ from you is that, and I might be wrong, and I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think the odds are favor that they're going to be unsuccessful in regime change, at least at this point. Yeah, we'll see.
The other factors I'd wonder about are the other Gulf states and what their perspective is on all of this. And I'd imagine that whatever it is, I would kind of suspect that this would have been one of the things when Trump did his big visit down there and they hammered out all these different investment trade deals and all that sort of thing. I would imagine they would have addressed this. So I wonder what the other Gulf states, what their opinion is on, because I know it's going to kind of differ from state to state, and they're also kind of on again, off again a little bit. But you've got the Shiite and the Sunni and Sufi divides between these different ones, and then within the other Gulf states, there's most of them are much more friendly to the West in general. I think, speaking broadly, than Iran is, and seeing the way that they received Trump and did with so much pomp and everything, and they have all these big deals agreed upon and everything, and obviously he's trying to pull them away from China's influence in that regard. And if the report is true that Putin told Khamenei to basically, you're on your own and you better button things up pretty quickly here, or you're going to get beholed, then I wonder how many friends Iran still has in the region. Obviously China, and China's no small friend. But
they're not going to get directly involved militarily. They might provide them equipment, but that's a long logistical line too, when you're talking about the U.S. Navy and the CIA and Mossad. Pakistan, from what I've heard, is giving all kinds of signals that they'll support him. It's been claimed that I haven't followed it up. Maybe it's real. Forgive me, all listeners, but I haven't had time to look into it. It's been claimed that Pakistan has said that if anyone attacks Iran with nuclear weapons, that they will respond by using nuclear weapons in support of Iran. I don't know if that's true. And even if they really did say it, I don't know what that means. There's also claims that they've got containers of equipment that have been shipped in from Pakistan in support of Iran. Certainly Azerbaijan can no longer be relied upon. Armenia has been just so hammered and so screwed that, under it's enjoying the tender mercies of the Atlanticists, where the Israelis and the Turks are cooperating in Azerbaijan to drive the Armenians out of their historical territories in order to settle all of that and kind of smear the idea of Russia as a protector in the Caucasus. So who surrounds them? Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan are not in any position to do anything. The Central Asian republics that they share, the Caspian Sea with, are not going to do anything. We've already talked about Russia. That's a question mark. They could be quietly helping them, but I don't think they're going to do anything overt. China, again, they're not going to risk their shit. They may support them with money. They may support them with intelligence, and they might even support them quietly with equipment. But I tend to think that China is going to stay out of it other than diplomatic pressure, which is not nothing. Afghanistan is on their border, but what's Afghanistan going to do? I suppose they could send fighters in, and a considerable number of them with experience, and maybe some old, U.S. equipment that they got left with after the United States pulled out in a spectacle, a catastrophic spectacle. Pakistan
that's interesting context.
Is the only one.
Yeah. And then as Guy from V here points out, he says, he mentions Macron saying that Trump left early from the G7 to negotiate a ceasefire. And interestingly, at that G7, the first thing that Trump said, standing there with Mark Carney, was that Russia should have never been kicked out of the G8.
Pushed out, yeah.
Yeah, and he said it was Obama and Trudeau were the ones that he said were responsible for that. He got to put Mark Carney through a little struggle session right there in his own territory. But then he also said that he'd be I remember if he said it would be a good idea or he would be open to having China as part of the G7, which is kind of an interesting comment to make. Then he left early, which I kind of suspect that this is entirely speculation, but I kind of suspect that him leaving early was a planned thing. This wasn't that there was some emergent thing he was coming back for. I think it was, this isn't a top priority right now. So I'm going to go there, sign some deals and give a speech and make some comments. And then, oh, sorry, I've got to leave. Got urgent business to attend.
I've got to leave. There's a new dramatic sort of thing that everybody can talk about how it's so important. And he goes, yeah.
Yeah. And he leaves Bessent as his proxy.
And hammers Macron on the way out for knowing nothing.
Was very interesting. Yeah.
And one guy in the chat here, Woodpit, has mentioned some Iraqi factions. Yes, there are Iraqi militias that will probably get involved, and there are a whole bunch of people who, well, not a whole bunch, but there's some significant number of military forces from Syria. When Syria fell, they took their equipment and they crossed the border into Iraq. So there are Syrian military elements that have relocated to Iraq, and there are Shiite militias, 12 Shiite militias, just like in Iran, who are in Iraq also. So Iraq is one where you could see some assistance given to Iran. So the big question, a lot of people are saying that there were a huge number of missiles that were fired at first, and now the number of missiles from Iran towards Israel is dwindling. So that means that they're running out. I don't know about that. I don't know. They could just be holding off, and should be, in order to see what comes next. And I think they're probably negotiating too. Persians will always get in there and negotiate. As a guy I knew who formerly did some bounty hunting work and enforcement work for organizations. He told me the story about putting someone in the trunk of a car with his ass hanging out of it and closing the trunk on his upper body and pulling his pants down and tapping the man's bare ass with a tire iron and saying, "There's always time to talk." You know? There is, yeah, I think the Iranians are aware that there's always time to talk. So I would expect that the biggest thing going on in terms of support for Iran, because I don't want to rule Russia out at this point, especially if Russia is going to give up on support for Iran in exchange for something. Especially in that case, I think that they would want to make more of a show, a genuine show of attempting to intervene diplomatically on behalf of the Iranians in order to give them a better deal, so they don't lose all their standing as supporters for Iran. So I think China and Russia are probably putting lots of pressure in order to direct the outcome as regards, diplomatic avenues. But we're just going to have to wait and see. Now, I want to be sensitive to your time. I've got you here for almost 3 hours, and I know you also have a wife and family.
Well, I'm used to the long streams, and there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you about.
Well, please do.
There's something else. Guy from V here. He says, soon after a German refueling jet revealed its transponder, which shows it's not the U.S. refueling. There's all of the other context to this being, as you're kind of alluding to here, you've got China and Russia, and the U.S. is actively engaged in negotiations with them on economic and trade, on the economic and trade front, and all these things are all sort of intertwined together. You've got the big trade deal negotiations with China, with the China adjacent nations. You've got the big deals just signed recently with Europe, or with the UK. Just signed stuff with Canada. Then you've also got obviously the Ukraine negotiations, and then having the strait blocked, and especially if they were to block the Strait of Hormuz, that's in absolute terms, that's much harder on Europe than it is on the United States. Like, it's going to make everything is going to get more expensive. But as if you remember way back in the days of yesteryear, when there was that big Signal Gate thing with Mike Waltz, and we saw the U.S. officials who were having conversation about bombing the Houthis, and JD Vance made the post or the comment about how doing this is more for our European quote unquote allies than it is for our interests. You've got Macron, who says, he gets a little ahead of himself there, saying that that Trump's going back to negotiate a ceasefire, and Trump's like, the fuck I am. That guy, he always gets everything wrong. And you've got the Germans, who are covertly refueling. It seems like the one big wild card that we haven't really talked about in all of this, who could be the one to make a big move one way or the other here, is Turkey. Because as you mentioned, Turkey and Israel are cooperating in Azerbaijan, but just forgot the Turkish leader's name.
Erdogan,
thank you. Yes, Erdogan is no big fan of the EU, and has his own aspirations for expanding territory. And obviously, there's no direct connection between Turkey and Iran, but they're direct geographical. I don't think there is.
They share a border in the east. I think they share a small border in the east, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Iran's so much bigger than I ever like. Every time I think Iran is it's just way bigger than I can ever think of.
Yeah, they have a 332-mile border, and it's right there near the Caucasus.
Okay, so that's pretty substantial. They're closer together than I thought they were. I'm just looking at a map right here. I could have just looked at it. What direction do you think Erdogan would be? It seems like he has the potential here that he could really throw his lot in either direction and move things, maybe not substantially, but maybe substantially.
Oh, they could. Turkey has an enormous military by any standard. Second largest in NATO, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they're not a nuclear power, at least not in any official sense. I'm sure they've made some developments of their own, but they don't have nuclear weapons as far as I'm concerned. Certainly not their own in their territory. The U.S. might still have some there. I don't know. The Turkish Republic has basically been an ally of Israel forever. I mean, more or less since its inception. I remember seeing a photograph from back in the day from the 1930s, and it was a group of Israeli Turkish Jews who had gone to Israel, if I remember correctly, and they had created the Ataturk Forest. You know, and the Turkish nationalists like to say that Ataturk himself was a crypto Jew from Thrace, because he was fair-skinned and he came from a city in Thrace that had a high Jewish population. Donme. So the Turkish Republic knows what side of the bread has the butter on it for them. And they're not going to be, I mean, they may send like a Mavi Marmara flotilla or two to try to break the Gaza blockade. And Erdogan is going to make all kinds of speeches in order to throw red meat to his Muslim supporters. But I can't see him intervening militarily in either direction. The only issue that really, and others have mentioned this, and I think they're right, the only thing that he really has to worry about is he's already packed full of Syrian refugees that they're just beginning to get out. If there's a massive splintering of Iran, or even a not so massive one, he could be looking at just huge numbers of refugees coming across the border and flooding him. And that area, that border region in the east, is one with a lot of Kurdish instability. And remember that you've got a big Kurdish population in Iran. That's actually something that should be brought up. The United States has been working with the Kurds together. The thing is that you've got different clans, and they basically break out the control of Kurdish regions in Iran. Is, if I remember correctly, anybody in the chat, who knows about this shit, like, Otto Pol does very well. You've got the Talibani and the Barzani. Different groups are in charge. The PKK, the Turkish Kurds, and some of the Kurds in Syria have relationships. But of course, Erdogan wants to deal with different groups and reach terms with them. The Iraqi Kurds have a different leader, and the ones in Iran have a different leader. Although there's some overlap, and it's not exactly on the geographic lines that are on the map. And Kurds themselves are just a group of clans. But yeah, I should have brought that up, because I would expect now that if you're ever going to pull a lever to do anything with the Kurds, if you can, because the U.S. relationship with the Iranian Kurds, I'm sure, is not, equivalent to their ongoing relationship with the ones in Syria. But if they were going to pull a lever, that would be one way to do it. They can also do it with the Baloch minority, with the Bakhtiaris in Iran. And I expect all that sort of stuff is, being pumped as hard as it can by Mossad and the Western intelligence services. But to answer your question, I don't see Turkey going either way. I think it's going to stay well the fuck out of it and try to consolidate its gains in Syria. I don't see them going head to head, other than rhetorically, with Israel. I see them as having a very serious concern about refugees coming into their country and destabilizing effects, because the East is the area they have the most trouble with already. The hardest to administer and defend and deal with. It's very rough country there as well. And someone was asking, I think it was Alabaster, I can't remember, was saying, if Iran is out of the BRICS, what other inroads does BRICS enjoy into the Middle East? Well, I mean, Turkey is basically like a junior partner observer country at this point. It could stand to gain if it becomes one. And as best I can remember, many of the Middle Eastern countries are perfectly willing to get involved with BRICS. I think Saudi Arabia might already even be involved formally. I can't remember. So, yeah, that's my take on Turkey.
And then BRICS, that gets us right back to the whole grand economic reordering conversation. Which it's interesting to think about how, if you go down the list of BRICS countries, there's been some focused dust up with each of them, except for I guess you could kind of say Brazil, with some of the stuff around Elon and X, but you've had obviously Russia and China. There's all the different things with them. Then South Africa. The administration, here's one of those other things, I guess, to go into the white pill, Ben, is the administration's approach to South Africa, which is one of those things that that I had no idea I was voting for that. I had no idea I even could vote for that. But them making an explicit priority of speaking out on behalf of white farmers as white farmers, and making special carve outs to bring some of the Boer farmers to the U.S., and then doing the whole struggle session with the South African president at the White House. It wasn't lost on me that all of that. It wasn't lost on me in all of that that South Africa is a BRICS nation. So it has its implications with all these things all being connected and intertwined. That has its implications as well on the whole grand economic reordering. And then you've got gold, and you got Bitcoin, and you've got the restructuring of the dollar system that the economic side of the administration is working on right now, that implicates all of that as well.
Yes. I was just trying. Yeah. The South African business is, it's a shame with the Boers, because, the ones who live there don't want to see their people leave.
Right.
So that was kind of a strange move on Trump's part. I'm happy he did it, because ultimately, sorry, I'm also just trying to figure out which the clan in Muhtadi, the clans in Iran are, but I'd have to look into that. Sorry, do it. Yeah. Over here thinking about South Africa and trying to figure out the names of the clans in these regions, and also scanning the chat. Yeah, it's a shame what happened with that. I like that it elevated public perception of the situation of whites in that country, and I think more and more people are looking to it to see our own trajectory if certain things aren't done about that trajectory. But I think I missed the main point you were making about the development of the wider economic picture with BRICS.
It was just noticing that that if you go down the list of all the BRICS nations, there's just in the 6 months, there's been a some sort of a kind of a unique focused incident with each of them, and except for Brazil. And
in India, he's been careful with Modi too.
Mm-hmm, right. So you had the India and Pakistan. I mean, this also with Pakistan going toward.
Oh yeah, you're
Pakistan,
right. There was that.
Getting involved in Iran. They had their little dust up that he, at least the public story is, he intervened and facilitated the negotiations to end that happening. Regarding Brazil, you had the thing with the judge there, and Moraes. And
yes, and Musk.
Yeah. But more broadly speaking, Marco Rubio, who has been absolutely a revelation to me thus far. I thought that appointing him as Secretary of State was basically like giving him some sort of reward for his recent loyalty, and also opening up a seat to be filled with someone else who's more reliable. And then he's been, I don't know that he's said or done anything that I've seen so far that made me go, oh, come on, Marco. He's been, we've over on the lab, we've started calling him Marco Grande instead of Little Marco. There's also Macro Rubio. Someone suggested that later, and I was like, damn it, I wish I'd have thought of that. Macro Rubio, that's really good.
Marco Venti.
Yeah. But one of the things he said very early on after the inauguration, or after his confirmation rather, was that we're entering a multipolar era. And he used the multipolar era reference and talked about spheres of influence. And the administration has also said and indicated in a number of other ways that going forward, they're making it like a matter of explicit policy that the Western Hemisphere is America's sphere of influence. The Don Rowe doctrine. And so that makes me wonder when we're going to get some sort of something with Brazil, because obviously there's a major major occupation by hostile powers, hostile influences within Brazil.
China,
Brazil,
Russia, yeah,
right, and
China, Russia, and our own deep state,
and our own, yes. So there's I'm wondering, we've gotten all these other BRICS nations, and then adjacent nations that are adjacent to, junior partners, as you say, that there's been dust ups with in the first 6 months. We haven't seen anything with Brazil yet, and really we haven't seen. Has there been anything in apart from Mexico, apart from the immigration issue, which I suppose immigration's broadly Western Hemisphere to a certain degree, but apart from that, there hasn't really been. Oh, there was the Panama Canal, that's another China thing. But yeah, I'm wondering when we're going to get something with Brazil. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if Rubio is, of course, a good choice, and others have guessed that he was brought in large part because with the, as they say, the reassertion of the Monroe Doctrine, the United States is going to be taking more of an interest in Latin American countries, and so Marco Rubio, speaking Spanish and knowing something of aspects of that culture and that world, is going to be a good choice as someone, the leading statesman for the United States to go down and do that. I don't know how much that helps him in a place like Brazil where they speak Portuguese,
right?
And I don't know, and I think I've seen some things about how Bolsonaro has stuck his head up here and there a couple of times. But yeah, all I've seen so far is the kind of indirect pressure about Brazil coming from people like Musk, and of course, what's the name? That goddamn Intercept, Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah.
He apparently really pissed somebody off in Brazil. So yeah, they're probably making choices about what to do and in what order. But I certainly would keep my eyes on the horizon, as you're pointing out, for something with Brazil, because that's going to be another thing that has to be dealt with. It's such a massive weight there in Central America. It's got such economic potential. It's just dealing with its own highly heterogeneous population, its own crime problems, and its own enormous corruption problems. So yeah,
lots of USAID activity down there.
Oddly enough, yeah. And I bet you that's some stuff that hasn't been turned off.
Right.
Although at this point, it's probably all, on behalf of Lula.
Right.
And that's one last, actually, we're getting to a point where we should probably wrap, but I want to throw one last thing onto the table. And now I just thought of it, and now I'm forgetting about it. It was one last kind of a summary statement. No, it was Lula, and it was U.S. aid, and it was a Brazil. Good God, I had a good summary thing that we needed to talk about that we had.
You talked about the funding not being turned off. For
no, it came to my head as something independent, so it won't pull completely from that. Let me give it just 1 second here if I can remember. God damn, man, when I had 2 brain cells left to rub together and they misfire. The entire picture with Trump. Oh, damn it. Well, maybe it'll come back to me. While I'm waiting for it to do so, was there anything else you wanted to cover, sir? It's a good last point too, damn it.
It'll come back after the stream ends. Yeah. I think that's probably the gist of it. I'll say, I guess one of the things I've been hammering over on my show and doing it a little performatively just to make the point is that we are in this liminal period where many things are changing, and I think we're seeing maybe to borrow observations from Yarvin, Trump is very clearly like an FDR, Lincoln sort of figure. I think he's probably more significant, and maybe I'm just downplaying the significance of the sort of global significance of Lincoln, FDR, just because I'm used to their story. But Trump seems like he's a more significant generational figure. Ultimately, that there is more transition and realignment and reordering that's happening. Either inspired or derivative directly from him, or just the mythos kind of that surrounds his whole rise, such a singular figure to be. His communication style is just completely unique. He has a singular capacity to completely dominate and yank around the news cycle. Which reminds me, Tom Luongo has made this observation, and I've started tracking it to see how often it happens. And the Trump Musk thing, however kayfabe it was, the Trump Musk thing did validate this. Luongo has pointed out that every Thursday you see the Trump camp come out. Usually Trump will fire off some truth or something like that, some new narrative, some new thing that's happening that gets the press cronies all freaking out and everything, all talking about it throughout the weekend. And then come Monday, they're onto something completely different. So it's like he's laying down a whole bunch of cover fire to create a narrative shift, and then operating under that.
Within the smoke canisters that he's fired to, provide him cover. Yeah, I certainly agree with that. What was that damn reality TV show that Sam Hyde was doing, where he had all the people in the room?
Oh,
I can't remember what it
was like the Big Brother, similar to Big Brother.
It doesn't really matter. The main point that I wanted to make is that I think what was it? To build on, as they say in their meetings, to build on what you were saying, Matt. He has certainly introduced something fish tank. He has created this whole. He's turned. Politics has always been about entertainment and spectacle, but he's the first person to turn politics into a 24/7 reality TV show spectacle. And so it certainly marks a shift. And I think it's no accident that in large part we've seen his rise and his political effectiveness be closely associated from the very beginning with the exploitation of social media and its opportunities. So in some sense, panem et circenses, as everybody was saying, or as the guy was just saying, Circus Maximus, bread and circuses, the necessary spectacle. He's made quite something of it. I don't know, I'm no expert on American history, but Lincoln did quite a bit more to our country in terms of basically cementing the centralized, the centripetal accumulation of power in a massive war in which the United States, I think it's still by far the war in which we lost the most people. FDR, of course, changed us and everything about our country into this strange socialist, social security, income tax kind of creature. I know he didn't come up with income tax, but sort of, he ended up cementing a lot of that. So I don't know yet whether Trump will be as big or as a transitional figure, to come back to that liminal theme, as either of those two were. But in terms of how American politics takes place and what is expected of it, and the image of the politician himself, it's been a sea change.
It turns out it's the McMahon's world, and we're all living in it.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we are.
Linda McMahon is still in his administration.
Good God.
I think she's the education secretary.
You follow a lot of it more closely than I do. My focus is on the great game aspect because I find it interesting. But I'm just so weak in these other areas. I'm in my boomerhood as regards tech and the economic stuff I never followed closely. So Yeah, but it's very, very good to be able to have you on and just sort of test, some of my ideas against yours. Because you do follow those things so closely. You run these shows regularly. You follow a lot of the aspects of it that I don't track closely. And also, as I've said before, I find you highly intelligent. I find your discussions interesting, and always very, very happy to have you on. I hope that everyone will take a look at the links in the description box down below for Kingpilled, for Matt's YouTube channel, and for your X. But before we go, since a lot of people came in over the span of this wide-ranging discussion, please take a moment and you can't call it an introduction when you're leaving, but for anyone who might have come in and who doesn't know what you're up to, tell them again about where they can find you, what your thing is, what kind of things you get up to, and where to follow you.
Yeah, I'm. This is a great honor. I very much enjoyed this. You're a good man. It's good to be friends. This is you or Kingpilled on YouTube, and also on Kick. I do a daily show, mostly daily during the week. It's usually pretty long. It can be 4 or 5 hours, especially lately since I've started moving most of my operations over to Kick, which is a platform that's a little more tuned for doing long streams like this, long live streams. So I am on YouTube. I'm going to continue posting stuff on YouTube, but I'm starting to migrate the streaming over to Kick, and then I'll probably be maybe uploading individual stuff to YouTube. I'm very active on Twitter. The Astrolabe, the show that I do on a daily basis, is just kind of a wide ranging. It's kind of like this: is a wide ranging review of whatever's caught my eye on Twitter over the past whatever intervening time since I did the last one. So I just am constantly, as I'm scrolling through Twitter, I'm tracking down a bunch of different stories, listening to podcasts and such. I'm just bookmarking things constantly, put it into a wide-ranging variety show, and just go through all the different stories that caught my eye. And it's largely focused on matters of tech, culture, politics, a lot of geopolitics. I've looked a lot about the this kind of grand reorganization of the economy, particularly the integration of Bitcoin. That's going to be more and more formally baked into the dollar system as the dollar system gets restructured, and sovereign wealth fund, all that sort of stuff. I've tracked that, and then the Silicon Valley sentiment. These are people I've spent a lot of time around, and that I kind of have a feel for their brain. So I stay tapped into them to listen to what they're saying, what they're moving toward, because it's a pretty substantially political and economically significant segment of the population. So yeah, that's the Astrolabe. I go live most of the time daily during the week, and enjoy doing that.
Hell yes. Well, I enjoy having you, and I hope all the guests got something out of this discussion. There's a series of question marks, but we've, sort of tracked the trajectory. This is episode 3, with the tech bros and the emerging counter elite. As I've said, in the past, many of Matt's takes were particularly prescient, certainly in predicting what was going to go on up through the election. And of course, I include, excuse me, Mr. Miranchuk, who rides shotgun quite often with Matt and has a channel of his own. Everybody can find him as well over on Twitter, or X. So a shout out to him as well. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks very, very much indeed. And until next time, I am Semiagog, and I am out.